Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first day of the Council City Rochester budget hearings. Since we have everyone in place, I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll for the Finance Committee.
Councilmember Evans.
Present.
Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Patterson.
Here.
Vice President Lightfoot.
Present, ma'am.
President Scott.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we are also joined by our council colleagues, Gruber, Lupien, Ortiz, and Pio. We are streaming today's hearings live on our social media, and Wxxi is broadcasting this as well. I want to thank everyone for their accommodations as we're dealing with an unprecedented situation on hosting these budget hearings for the first time virtually due to the COVID-19 epidemic and the guidelines around social distancing. To my colleagues this morning, we will be meeting with the council's clerk office, the administration consisting of the mayor's office, Office of Management and Budget, Department of Human Resources, Communications, and the Law Department. Then we will conclude the morning's hearings with the Department of Environmental Services, and then we'll take a break for lunch around 12:45 for about an hour. We will go through each section of the budget, and I will ask that if anyone has questions, if you could please write your name in the comment section of the video, and then I will call it. Before I move on to the next section, I will take a final survey of the group to make sure that there are not any other outstanding questions. I will also just remind everyone that there are 9 council members, so if you cannot get all of your questions in, there is a process that staff has where the questions can be submitted in writing and we can get follow-up questions after that. So with that, I want to move to the first section
before
of the
budget. Mr. Chairman, can I just make a quick statement before you get started, sir, please?
Sure, go ahead, Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment of privilege just to say that we've never been through a time like this before. And I wanted to commend the mayor, her administration. I wanted to commend Chris Wagner and his staff because this was an amazing feat to be able to transition during this time that we've never transitioned before. Hundreds of people had to work from home with laptops had to be provided. A lot of work had to be done to put this budget together under extreme conditions that were unprecedented and no one's ever done before. So I just wanted to start off by just saying thank you to your staff, Chris, and on all the hard work that all the department heads have done. I think it's respectful and purposeful for us to be able to acknowledge that before we get started. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, no, thanks. And I was going to also
appreciate that.
we'll go to the clerk.
Sorry about that, council member. It appears you froze for a while and we missed what you said.
I said, Mr. Scanlon, if you want to start off, and then we'll also go to the clerk.
Well, President Scott, Chairman Evans, and members of council, first, good morning. And let me begin by recognizing my colleagues who will be available to answer questions. Hazel Washington, the city clerk, and Bertha Manigault from the Licensing Bureau. They're both on the call. It's hard to see exactly where they are, but they are here. In addition, I'd like to thank the other members of the central staff in the city council office and the city clerk's office who worked incredibly hard during this budget season in order to prepare the analysis of the mayor's proposed 2020-2021 budget for you. Among them are Katie Hasselwander, who has only been with us for 3 short months, and it seems like she's been here so much longer. Conda Brown, who was incredibly helpful with her analysis, and Barb Campbell, who is new in her role and helpful as well. I'd like to extend our thanks additionally to Sarah Ruckberg, who is our budget analyst, also on the call, who was great to work with and extremely helpful throughout the entire process. The council had the opportunity to review your own department budget several times previously, but I would point out that the department budget did see an increase with the Police Accountability Board being funded for 12 months this year rather than 6 in last year's budget. If you have any additional questions for myself or for the city clerk's office regarding the budget, we'd be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Anything you wanted to add, Ms. Washington?
Good morning, and I'd just like to thank everybody for working so hard to get us to this point.
Thank you.
And Conda is also on the call. Conda Brown, she's on the call too.
Thank you. Questions for the council and clerk's budget? Great. If there are no questions, okay. Councilmember Gruber. Go ahead, Councilmember Gruber.
Thank you, Chair Evans. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a difficult time with. I'm not sure if it's my feed or it's your feed, but I'm assuming you called on me, and I could not let the section go by without some questions. I think there's a couple of things in particular that I just like a little bit of clarity on, generally speaking, and then I have some specific questions too. Generally, this is obviously my first time on council where we have a census and a redistricting coming, and I just want to hear a little bit about the process for that.
Historically, Councilmember Gruber, the last time we did that 10 years ago, I was brand new to the office, and I remember we hired a consultant. So in our preparation for the budget work, we looked up who the consultant was and the cost associated with it, which was around $7,500 potentially at its maximum level to hire a consultant who was able to review the data. And then for the census, folks would have to have, it would look at the 4 council districts, of which there has to be a certain percentage difference between each of the residents in those districts. So the borders may shift slightly. We, in our analysis, decided to put in our professional services line additional funding to support the use of a consultant this year to help with that process, which also does include a public engagement portion.
And was there any discussion, I know we'll talk with the mayor in the next section about some of the great work that her administration is doing with data and analytics, but were you able to engage in any discussion on whether this is something that can be done in-house, or are you pretty set that the right thing to do is to have a consultant work on this?
We haven't begun to engage that directly yet. The census information won't be in until later, and usually the redistricting occurs in the 4th quarter, so somewhere between April and June of next year. So we would have time to look at that. Even if we did it in-house, it might still involve a chargeback to a different department for time spent.
Sure. And I guess my last question on that piece is whether or not we feel comfortable as a council. Like, are you planning on going out to RFP, I presume, or is there some type of were you just looking at the previous consultant as a place of reference, or is that someone that you plan on using again?
Previous consultant was Bill Sullivan, who was this council's chief of staff a number of years ago. And we would be open to discussing with the council and seeing what would be the best option. It may be something that folks have to have a specific expertise in, or it might be something we could do in-house. We haven't started to identify exactly the process for that yet, but would be willing to engage the council members to see what they would like to do.
Okay, thanks. Chair Evans, I have additional questions, but I'll cede the microphone and come back later.
All right, great. And remember, you can put any of these questions in writing and get answers that way too. Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to make a statement here, or just, it is part of your question, but I see that, of course, with the racial equity and leadership tools that we're using within our all of our departments this year in our budget for the first time ever, I noticed that one of the survey questions was how that we need to engage more with our Latinx population when concerning hiring and or engagement with that particular community. And I just wanted to ask, how did you address that issue from the clerk's office?
Clerk Washington.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of that.
in the survey of the racial equity and leadership work that's been doing on, we're utilizing obviously a tool, a equity tool within our budget across departments. And one of the things that was acknowledged in the survey was that we could do a better job with working with our Latinx population and or hiring from within. So I wanted to see, how did you guys address that in your budget?
Okay, we recently changed the title of our receptionist position to bilingual, receptionist bilingual. We have not hired for that position yet, but we have changed the title to a receptionist bilingual title. So we're hoping to fill that as soon as City Hall opens back up and we can finish the interview process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councilmember Lupien, did you have a question?
Yes. Are we just in the clerk session or council in general?
Council and clerk. Council
Okay.
and clerk.
I just wanted to check in about the Police Accountability Board. I know it's something that's on a lot of people's minds right now. Where are we in the process? Have we already made the appeal, or is that forthcoming?
We have engaged our legal counsel and are intending to make the appeal. So we are working right now with them. They are taking the lead on the matter, but they will present the appeal, and when there is a date and additional information available to share, we will make sure that council gets that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes. Yes.
All right,
Sorry,
last question, last question, Councilmember Gruber. And because we work with these people regularly, we can always also call them on the phone or send them an email. I'm not trying to.
I can assure you, Councilmember, you all do that.
Yeah. So Councilmember Gruber, question.
That's very true. I assume we had the time on the schedule to be able to ask some questions, but if you want me to put these in writing instead, I'd be happy to.
No, go ahead. We got like 1 or 2 more minutes left, but go ahead, ask your question.
I wanted to know from Clerk Washington, first of all, I want to commend her and her team on some incredible work transitioning to online licensing, in particular, the marriage. I think that's incredibly important work to have done during COVID. I just wanted to ask, is there an opportunity to do additional licensing online as we move forward? Are you looking into expanding other permits and license processes?
Thank you. We have not looked at any other licenses. We're trying to keep up with we had 87 requests since we opened it up for marriage license applications online, and that's been in about a week and a half. And we will consider it in the future, but right now we haven't considered any other options other than adding the domestic partnership to that.
Thank you.
Any last minute questions? Okay, we will roll into the administration section of the budget. And I believe our Madam Mayor, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Hey, welcome, Madam Mayor.
Please give us 1 moment, if you would, Councilmember, so that we can admit the members of the administration into the call.
All right, we'll take a quick pause before we let the rest of the mayor's team in, and then we'll start. And while BJ is doing that, I think I said WXXI. We are actually broadcast live on City 12 and Spectrum channel 1303.
All right, Councilmember, everyone should have been admitted into the call at this point.
Okay, thank you. I want to start by just thanking the mayor and her team. As chair of finance, I can tell you I work very closely with budget and Chris Wagner, and I am amazed at what this this team has been able to accomplish with all that you have been dealing with, the COVID-19 situation, the uncertainty around revenue, sales tax, and the unrest that all has happened. but the mayor's team is still standing. The mayor is still standing strong, and I really just want to say that it gives me a deeper appreciation for all the employees of the city of Rochester, the work that you've been able to do to get a budget to us on time, balanced with all of the different competing priorities that you have. So I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, and your team for your work. This section of the budget, we will talk about the mayor's office, the project management office, the Office of Public Integrity, the Office of Data Performance and Analytics, the Office of Community Wealth Building, and the Office of Planning. But before we get into those sections, I want to turn it over to the mayor to make any comments that she may have and also introduce her team. And then I'll just also add, there's a first section of the budget that I know Councilmember Vice President Lightfoot might have questions on, which is also the community engagement section. But with that, I'll turn it over to you, Madam Mayor, for any comments that you might want to make.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans and Chairperson of the Finance Committee. Want to thank Council President Scott and Vice President Lightfoot and all the members of Council for allowing us to address you today. I first want to acknowledge Chris Wagner and the budget team who have done an extraordinary job of putting together a budget in the most difficult times. You know, we thought that the crisis, the financial crisis, was very challenging for the city back in 2013-14. But, you know, this pandemic that we're in has been a real challenge because we were in the middle of budget planning when the pandemic hit. Chris and his team did a yeoman's job of actually really projecting and trying to figure out how do we move the city forward and do the things that we needed to do in investing and continuing to serve our citizens while also making sure that the city continues to be fiscally sound. And so I definitely want to thank him and thank all of the members of our budget team and finance team for the great work that they have done. In this year's budget, you will see a couple of new sections, and one of them includes the Real Initiative survey. We asked each of our departments to look at their department through an equity lens and to ask specific questions. I want to acknowledge the work of Vice President Lightfoot, as well as Lomax Campbell, who is the director of the Office of Community Wealth Building, for working with Letitia Doucette on developing this survey that each of our departments could fill out. We cannot just talk about racial equity in leadership and not actually reflect that in the document, in our budget document, and have our departments think about how they are looking at it across the board. When we look at equity, we're talking not just about race, we're talking about gender, we're talking about other issues that apply to the LGBTQ community as well. And so we definitely wanted to make sure that this year's budget had a section right after the mayor's message and after the survey. You can read the departmental responses and the things that we learned from the department and things that we need to work on. I think that it was indicated by somebody earlier that we do know that we need to reach out to the Latinx community a lot more, and we have been doing so. If you notice that many of our press conferences, we have included Ibero to do translation for us, and that has really gone over well because we want to make sure that we are inclusive as a community and inclusive as a city, and we have to lead from the front. One of the challenges in creating in this budget and prior to a chief equity officer is really to look at those challenges that we face as a city, to work not just internally, but across the spectrum and into other departments as well as other governments and businesses to really highlight the work that needs to be done around healing, racial healing, but also how do you go about doing that? When we went through a year-long sort of review internally, what we found is that a lot of businesses was reaching out to the city of Rochester, asking us, how do we diversify? What does that look like? How do we make that a part of the very fabric of our organization? And it is our hope that we'll be able to reach across those aisles and do those and help them be able to lift up everyone in our community. As it pertains to the budget, you will see that we took a painstaking look at our budget. Our budget has been reduced, and our budget director can talk a lot about what changes are in the works. One of the things that we also changed was the Office of Innovation to really look at and created the Office of Data Performance and Analytics led by Kate May. This office is very important to how the city is going to be able to make decisions in the future. It has to be about how we look at the data and have the data help us drive decisions as we move forward as a community and as a city. We know that technology is changing. This is the first time I've been on Zoom for a budget meeting. So I think that we've all adjusted very, very well to the changing times, and we will have to continue to adjust and allow the data to drive us. Every department underneath the mayors, from our planning department to our Office of Community Wealth Building to our communications department, to all of them have worked very, very hard to look at not only what's best for our citizens, but what's also best for the city of Rochester and all of our employees. I'm thankful that you have given us the opportunity to address you this morning. And I know that we have a couple days, so we'll be talking, but really wanted to highlight those new changes in the budget that in the mayor's department, as well as acknowledge the fact that we did adopt last year the comprehensive plan, Rochester 2034. We want to thank Doreen Kirkmeyer and her team. They are underneath the mayor's office now, and I've been doing a yeoman's job of really working to lead our community forward and guiding the Rochester 2034 plan, and the budget also reflects that. There's a section and that is a guide that you will see that once you go through each of the sections, will refer you back to what section of the comprehensive plan we're talking about. And so across the board, we've taken a painstaking look at how we budget as it pertains to equity, how we budget as it pertains to the comprehensive plan, and how we budget as it pertains to moving our community forward. And we appreciate the time this morning. Oh, let me introduce my staff. Of course, you have our budget director, Chris Wagner. You have Tassie Demps, who is the director of HR, Tim Curtin, who is the corporation counsel, Ramonda Gibson, who's the person in charge of, it works in the Office of Community Wealth Building and getting people jobs. You have Dr. Cephas Archie, who is our Chief Equity Officer, Tim Ware, who is our Director of OPI, John DeAsh, who's in charge of our training, Rose Nichols, who's the Deputy Director of HR, Sandra J. Simon, who's the Director of the Office of Special Projects and Education Initiatives, Kate May, Kate May, who's the Director of Data Performance and Analytics, Dr. Lomax Campbell, who is the Director of the Office of Community Wealth Building, Sarah Kreshman, who is our liaison to our unions, Margaret Nelson, who's in charge of our, Margaret, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your department, but it's IT, programming and IT, as well as Doreen Kirkmeyer, who's the Director of Planning. And I think that we have Leticia Doucette, who's also in charge of the Real Initiative and working with Dr. Archie on those initiatives, as well as Chris Martinelli, who's in HR, Justin Roy, who's our communications director. And I believe that okay, you have Brad Willows, who is in charge of our financial empowerment centers, Jeff Moore, who's in charge of our HR department as it pertains to safety. And you have Sarah Ruckberg, Suzanne Warren, Matt Cahill, Sarah Boyce, who works for the Department of Budget, Tom Miller, who is in charge of employees in HR. And I believe that that is the team that we have on the line this morning.
And don't forget Josanne. I think Josanne Reeves is.
Oh yeah, I didn't see Josanne up there. of course, Jose
You know we
Reese
love Josanne.
is all in line and helps us when it comes down to dealing with our city council matters. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you. Let's start. Vice President Lightfoot, I'm going to start with you. Questions with the community section, as well as we'll start with Office of Management and the Budget, 315 to 318. Vice President Lightfoot.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Evans. Just wanted to reiterate that, you know, what the mayor is saying about the racial equity and leadership work. I want to acknowledge again Dr. Cephas and welcome him to our team and our family. And just, you know, I really want to touch on bases on this and get an overall view because for me anyway, the community input section is the most important section of the entire budget book as far as I'm concerned as an elected official. To be able to hear from our citizens of what is important to them and what do they hold dear to their heart, and or to take the things that they may want for us to focus our attention on and their ideas, right? And implement them. I think it's very important that our community see how that we're actually not only just talking about, you know, for them to come out to these meetings and spend their days and their times and put forth a lot of ideas, and then they should be, we should follow back on those ideas, and they should know that we're trying to do everything we can to implement any good ideas that they may have to help move our city forward. So my first piece, I would like to ask, could someone please, from your administration, Mayor, tell me just the overall process of how you worked with the community input section this year, and then I'll go into just a couple of questions and I'll yield the mic.
I'll start off and then the budget director can come in. As you know, we were in the middle of pandemic, so we were not able to do in-person sessions for the community input session that we usually do. So this year we actually did an online survey, and we also had a teletown hall for our residents to be able to provide community feedback. And one thing that we heard loud and clear from a number of our residents was that their number one focus was to make sure that we maintain public safety. And that is reflected in the budget document, making sure that our police, fire, 911 services were on the forefront. During this pandemic, many of our residents were very adamant that that was what they cared about the most, and the budget reflects that. And so this year, although we were not able to have an in-person session, we were able to get feedback from our residents, and they did fill out the survey online, and as well as participated in a teletown hall where we asked many survey questions, and it's included in the first section of the book, their responses.
The last year, Mayor, we had 28,718 direct calls to our residents. This year, the telephone town hall, there were only 13,267 direct phone calls. Can you just explain why the decrease in direct phone calls?
So I would have to turn that over to Justin Roy, our Director of Communications. I think that we tried to use, and let me not try to answer that question. Let me just ask him to answer that because my understanding was that we made more calls instead of less this year. Justin?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Lightfoot, I'll look into that further. I believe we made additional phone calls. That may be a typo. Let me look into that further. I know that what we did is we looked to identify active phone numbers all throughout the city limits, and to made phone calls also beforehand for opt-in as well as the night of. And I'm wondering if what's omitted there is we only did the night of versus the pre-opt-in phone calls, but I will get you an answer on the total numbers and correct it if necessary.
Okay, this is my last question, and I have a quick statement, and I'll yield the floor. What are we doing in the surveys? Last year and the previous year, you know, it's my third budget. What are we doing to map and track the questions or the input from the community? Like, say, for instance, if they give ideas, what are we doing to track the ideas that we're receiving from the community and what we're actually implementing from those ideas from the community? Are there ways that we're tracking that?
So in the beginning section of the budget, where we talk about the survey, where we ask questions, they really don't have an opportunity to give a whole lot of ideas for programs and in that implementation. But part of the work that Kate is going to do as the Director of Data Analytics and Data Performance and Analytics is really to look at and track the data across the spectrum of a number of different programs that we're running internally and other things that we're doing externally. Kate, if you want to talk a little bit more about what you're tracking and how in the future, and the reason why I think that this is very important is because we want the data to be able to tell us what we should be investing in and if the best investments that we're making are the right investments. So Kate, if you want to expound upon your position and the reason why this office is so very important.
Sure. So the office will be working a lot on many different data initiatives. One, building out the infrastructure to more regularly report on the budget KPIs. So it's not a once a year or quarterly exercise. Hopefully it will be available frequently than that. The budget metrics that you see in the department sections, as well as the Rockstat initiative metrics. We're also looking to enhance the open data portal, which did a soft launch during the COVID crisis. We had some unfortunate timing there, but we are doing some pretty intense outreach to community organizations and local researchers about how we can best serve them the data that they need to both apply for grants and do neighborhood planning studies, as well as so that internal staff can do evaluations of our programs and what's working and what's maybe not working, and serving that out to the community in an accessible way on the open data portal. So we're working with an organization called Open Cities Foundation to engage with over 40 different stakeholders of that data portal to understand their primary needs first. We also intend to collaborate with the planning department to do some regular outreach with whoever wants to show up from the public about how to use the data portal, what data resources are available from the city's website and the data portal, and also just some overviews of how to work with that data and gathering their feedback at those sessions to make sure that what we're serving out is accessible and relevant.
Okay, thank you. I would also add that I think what we've learned from COVID-19 in this virtual world is that a lot of people pay attention to our live streams, our YouTubes, our Facebook. We're finding out that we in some of our YouTube Facebooks from City Council, we've had hundreds and hundreds of views. And so I would just offer as a consideration in the future that we could maybe host some of those virtual budget input sessions on Facebook Live or YouTube Live to get more community input, because that seems to be, that's where the people are. They're on social media. So I would just offer that for consideration in the future, as opposed to maybe the in-person meetings that oftentimes are the same people attending. And a lot of people, either because of work, they have working 2 and 3 jobs, or they're not able to attend those meetings, but they could log on virtually if given that opportunity. Also, I just want to real quickly, and this is my last piece, because this is the next part after the community input session, is the Let's Get Real initiative. And so I hope that people took time to read this. And I know in our chairs meeting, some council members had some questions, right? And I have to also piggyback off the mayor and say that it's been a pleasure to be a part of an amazing team with Moia, Lomax, Rose, Letitia, Thad, Tina, and Hank. Has been amazing working with them over the last 2 years to do something that we see now how important it is with this COVID-19 and all of the sensitivity around a lot of issues around equity. So I just want to understand that we were preventive in Rochester, and we were ahead of the curve on this because we've been doing this work way before all of this happened. And so I just hope that we have council members that have questions around this work, because a lot of work has been done. I know some of you have had questions, and I think this is the time to be asking those questions. And I know we have the people on the line that can help answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gruber, you have questions related to the mayor's office, 3-4?
Yes, yes, I do. So first of all, let me just say, I really do appreciate, I know we had a work session prior to the budget. I appreciate the new KPIs. I look forward to the time when there's new KPIs for all the departments, but this was obviously a great first run at it, and I think this is really helpful and offers a lot of clarity. I have a few questions on the mayor's section, so I'll just, I know it's broken up into a couple different departments. I'll just kind of ask them in groups. In terms of the data analytics, I also want to say thank you for, I think the change of name here is very welcome. I think it's very much in line with what this department thrives on. So I like that a lot. I just want to ask two questions to the mayor and Kate. There's a KPI specifically about multimodal planning, and I just wonder if you can give a little bit of a little bit more language as to what's planned for that KPI.
I'll start off and then I'll turn it over to Kate to add. So that planning is, we had a bike share program. We're looking to bring bike share back this summer, of course, given the COVID situation. That's a little bit of a challenge. We also have planning to do scooters as well as bike lanes. As you know, we have been aggressively with DES helps and Eric Fish looking at ways to put more bike lanes in the city. So it's and working with RGRTA on their Reimagine RTS program. And so across the board, we're looking at how do we make sure that people have access to opportunity to get to and from work or to and from the grocery store. One of those other components that I believe that we put an RFP out for and are in the process of evaluating is also car share. And so a few years back, we did van pool as well. And so we're trying to get each of our citizens the opportunity to actually travel in a way that's more conducive to their lifestyle and what they would like. So it's trying to develop a multi-faceted approach to transportation, rather that's public transportation, car share, bike share, or doing it via scooter. And we have a team, Brenda Massey has been working with Eric Frisch on this for a period of time. And we have had a number of successes here and we'll continue to build this out over time. Kate, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I can follow up with Brenda to get the most up-to-date information about where the car share program sits. I know there was some questions about what was going to happen with the grant funding this time. So we'll follow up with all of you and get that update about the exact timing for what's the next steps on the car share. The plan for that was to do an all-electric system. So that would have been a pretty innovative idea. I'm not sure if that's still the exact plan, but we'll get you that update.
Thanks. And just a follow-up question on that. I guess two follow-up questions on that. Mayor, in the past, I know the city has put in some money on into the bike share program, and I just want to state for the record for anyone listening out there that the closure of Pace and Zagster is not a reflection of ridership in Rochester. That we had excellent ridership. It is a product of it being a very precarious business, the ride sharing industry, and Pace and Zagster are closing pretty much all their operations across the country. So I'm confident we'll get bike share back here. I just wanted to know from you, Mayor, A, if the city is continuing to reserve some dollars to be able to spend on a new company coming in, and B, knowing that this Office of Data Analytics is working on the multimodal planning, is some of the work that you, myself, and the Director of Policy, Kelly Maturko, started with scooters about a year ago. If Kate's shop should be looped into some of that work as well.
So to the first part of the question regarding the bike share program, we do believe that hopefully this summer, given the COVID situation, many of the bike share programs have pulled bikes back. You are 100% right, and thank you for noting that. The Pace Zagster program pulling out of Rochester had nothing to do with ridership. It had everything to do with their business model and having challenges all around the country. As it pertains to the scooter legislation, of course, I think that that's something that we should do, pull Kelly into it. I know that we have been working with RGRTA as part of their Reimagine RTS program. Bike share was a part of that. And so we were going to partner with them and possibly link up with them and have one provider throughout the county of Monroe. So that's our plan. That was our plan before this hit. I'm not sure exactly where it's at right now, but we will get you an update on that.
Thank you. And so my final two questions on the mayor's section item, just to not monopolize the microphone. One is, I wonder, I know Durain's on the call. I just want to say kudos to the Office of Planning on the ROC 2034 plan. I think it's absolutely incredible work. I also think, for the record, it makes a great deal of sense to move the Office of Planning into the mayor's office. So I appreciate that move. Durain, I'm wondering if you can just put in writing who is on the ROC 2034 Oversight Committee. I see that referenced in here, but I don't know who's on that committee. I'd love to see those names. And then a shared question for Durain and for Lomax. Both of you have, as KPIs, building the capacity of community organizations. And I think it makes sense for both of you to have that because of the work that each of you do. But I'm wondering how you'll approach that collaboratively and to make sure that you're building more capacity. And one final plug about that, I always, every year during budget hearings, I encourage the administration to think through building capacity, not just of community-based organizations, but even nonprofits that are right here in attached to City Hall. I'm thinking about the Friends of organizations, the Friends of Verona Street, the Friends of the Public Market. These are all places that I think could use the same type of skill sets that Dr. Campbell and Durain are going to bring to the community. So I'd love to hear your joint plan for that capacity building.
Oh, okay, thank you, Counselor. What we're referring to here is that, the planning office is fairly nimble in responding to community engagement needs across departments through City Hall. But one specific program that we are working with right now, with partnering with NBD, is the Community University Program, which we were going to launch this past spring, but obviously COVID kind of halted that, but we're going to be working on hopefully launching it in the fall. And that is setting up this ongoing semester-like community workshops where we can build capacity in the community to help partner with the city and getting their agendas advanced. So that is something that we were going to, that we were talking to Lomax with specifically about partnering with providing some of the curriculum for that program. So we will be working with them in advancing that curriculum as we move forward and get that plan. And we also had a group of community members who helped us design the whole program and what they needed, what they wanted to see, what kind of programming they wanted to see. So I've been working with Daisy on getting that set up. So that's one way we're communicating with Lomax. I'm sure there's more ways we can do that. So Lomax, you and I will have to work together to see how we can join forces.
Okay, thank you. Let me move to Council Member Gruber. Councilmember, I'm sorry, not Councilmember Gruber. Councilmember Gruber, you have anything else?
I think I was supposed to respond to that question as well, Councilman.
Dr. Campbell, there's something you wanted to add? Go ahead and add, Dr. Campbell, briefly.
Yes. I think he asked us both to respond to that. So Dr. Gruber, I appreciate you for the question. Two of the ways that community wealth building are explicitly assisting organizations in building their capacity are on the racial equity, lens development, and leadership development front. Many of you know we hosted 3 Undoing Racism community organizing workshops back in the fall of last year. And rolling out of that initiative, which allowed about 80 people to go through that 2.5-day training offered by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, we created a chapter referred to as the Western New York Undoing Racism Alumni Network, which we have about 95 members which are essentially alumni of the training. We've been meeting monthly, and right now we have a coalition of about 10 different organizations working on a joint proposal to get funding for more of those workshops to be done for their senior management teams, board members, and employees, and so forth. So that's one of the ways we're building capacity of the local service organizations. The other way is through our collaborative efforts with the RIT Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Redco to build the entrepreneurial ecosystem and enhance that ecosystem. There are resources that Redco manage that we're looking to leverage to begin to build a resource partner enhancement program, which is going to be a cohort-based program where local business serving institutions will be evaluated based on their current service provision for small businesses. And then they would go through an 18 to 24 month process to enhance their service provision and receive technical assistance to do that. And then they'll be post-evaluated and have to provide a sustainability plan to show how they plan to keep those enhancements in place. So those are two of the very explicit ways we're looking to support local organizations and building capacity. Thank you.
Great. And Dr. Campbell, while you're talking, and I got you, can you also just touch on, I mean, this is something that I think I did a dance when the city got involved with this, the financial empowerment centers, because this office and the mayor's office, obviously the city has done a lot of great things, but this concept of empowering individuals to be able to be self-sufficient with the financial empowerment centers, which brings together lots of folks in the community and really are getting people interested and informed on basically building their financial health, their financial well-being. Can you touch on how that's going and plans for the 2021 year?
Absolutely, and thank you for that, Councilman Evans. First and foremost, we began working on the Financial Empowerment Center initiative early in my tenure with the city, and so we're grateful that it was able to come to fruition this winter. Back around February, we did a soft launch, and we've partnered with Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Rochester through external funds provided to support this effort to hire a program manager and 4 financial counselors that reflect the community, know the needs and backgrounds of the community because they're from the community, and they're providing free one-on-one financial counseling services. Pre-COVID-19, the program was designed to be administered out in the community at various tables from MCC downtown campus to Ibero to the Rochester Housing Authority, just different places throughout the community, the library, and they would rotate so that they were community-based and accessible to our residents. They're assisting residents with addressing at least 4 different broad goals. And these are, as I mentioned, highly trained professionals in this space, and so they're assisting with banking access, debt alleviation, savings, and credit repair. And there's no residency requirement, no income requirement. So anybody can take advantage of these free services. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say, for my council colleagues, this concept is really revolutionary. In terms of these financial empowerment centers, and with the COVID situation, I mean, it's really been right on time in terms of
frozen
being a service of great folks to the community with. Let me move on to
on that note, Lomax. There's just a note in there that there's a lot of grant funding that's losing from the FECs. Can you explain that? Is that hurting the service?
No, it's not that we're losing the grant funds, we're spending them down. Each month, Consumer Credit bills us for the staff wages, and so we're spending down the funds that we've previously raised.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ortiz and then Councilmember Lupien.
Thank you. So I have a couple of different questions on this section, but the first thing I wanted to really quick on the survey results, thank you very much for trying to acquire input from the community despite the situation we're going through. But I think most certainly it highlights the digital divide even further when we look at the responses on here and the percentages of folks that do not have school-age children, 77%. Those not worried about their housing situation, 82%. It goes on and really kind of paints a picture, obviously, of folks who have access, folks who don't necessarily have children. And we know that obviously our community is heavy with both of those things as far as not having access and having children in the system and taking advantage of the programs that are necessary for them. So I guess for me, this just highlights that particular issue and encourage us to continue that work as far as providing access, but also highlights the importance of that face-to-face communication when we can finally get back to it, of that neighborhood input, because at this point, the survey results to me are still not as reflective of the entire community as we'd like them to be on there. So I think it's really important, as soon as we can get back to it, or other ways of getting input, perhaps mailing, perhaps, I'm not exactly sure, but I still think that there are some gaps there for us in this particular year, but understandably so. That being the case, one of the questions that I have is on the Office of Data Analytics. With all of the reports and the evaluations that are being completed, how exactly do we plan on tracking the implementation of the findings and data and results as they are uncovered, to ensure that either process improvements and or policy changes will actually be a result of the data that is brought forth from this office? How do we plan on trying to ensure that that's incorporated in policy changes?
I'll start off, and then I'll let Kate, chime in. And so the Office of Innovation, prior to the new office being created, really looked at a lot of data. And I think that our budget last year was really reflective of those changes that needed to be made. Whether you're talking about the reason why we instituted the racial equity and leadership and got involved in that, the financial empowerment centers, and the reason why we were able to secure dollars for that, the work that we've done with the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative and why we have been really involved in that, the work that we've been doing as it pertains to getting people jobs and trying to help them actually learn how to fish instead of giving them fish. I think across the board, the data has shown us over the last couple of years that we needed to do work inside of our neighborhoods, inside of our community, and uplift people, and that what they were looking for was that assistance of, if you don't know better, you can't do better. And the data prior to us getting involved in this space was very limited. The Office of Innovation at that time really worked with external community partners to sort of drive that understanding and looking at what the community was doing, looking at what the city was doing, and trying to build a comprehensive plan on how we could move our community forward. The reason why we also now are working with many of our partners in small business development is because we wanted to make sure that that they had a one-stop shop, that many people would go from, rather it was Ibero to the Urban League to Pathstones to all of these different community organizations to try to figure out, how do I start a business? How do I get a business plan? And in that process, we'll basically lose hope and lose focus and say, you know what, forget it. So we developed through that data, we were able to, now develop a partnership with Sourcelink and working in partnership with all of those different entities that's providing that service, create a table in a space where we could actually build a footprint for people. And so I think that the data in our budgets, since we started tracking data, has reflected the work and the understanding that we've gotten from the people that live in our city and our community and what they've been looking for. We want to take that a step further. And this budget reflects us taking that a step further by creating the data performance and analytics department, and having Kate really lead that. And you'll be able to see, based on the KPIs and other work that we're doing, that the results of those discussions that we've had directly with the community and the change that they wanted to see. So Kate, if you want to add on to that, you can.
Sure, so just to talk about a few specific tactics. So we're heavily engaged in the What Works Cities program that we've talked to council about briefly, related to the KPI updates. And so if you look at those criteria, and we can send those to you with our other updates following this hearing, there's a number of different pillars for us to focus on, and we try to take the most rational approach to it by looking at what are the most foundational things to do first that'll help us succeed across the other pillars. So that's what we've done with the data governance initiative. We've got a data governance committee that spans across the majority of the departments, where we're meeting with folks to understand our data infrastructure, our data classification, making sure that when we do create more data and share more data, that it's done safely and with high quality to maintain integrity and privacy and security. We're also simultaneously working on the KPI updates, which will hopefully guide the production of better data and reporting to things that are most useful to the departments at a strategic level. Going down to the bottom level of operational widget metrics, we're doing process improvement training with the departments. We've trained over 120 staff members from different departments about how to look at each and every program and process that they do and break it down to what are the individual steps and roles that people do to carry out the processes across teams, and really look at their data from how many of these process widgets do they make, how long does it take, how many are right, and focusing on that granular data in conjunction with the strategic data and performance. Hopefully we can look to see what's working at a strategic level, but also what's working on a day-to-day level. And if we're approaching from both sides, the goal is to be able to see what is working. And in the Wxxi's program, sort of the mid-level program goals that we're going to be focusing on later this year and heavily next year, it's focused on program evaluation and repurposing. So how can we work with budget office to understand what works, document it, and feed that data back into the budget process and the planning process. So also working with HR to feed that into the strategic planning for succession planning and workforce planning, that sort of thing. How can we see who's doing what, how long it takes, what are the critical skills that we need to keep these processes moving, and really combine a lot of the strategic level work that's been happening in different department silos into more of a citywide cohesive effort.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. Kate. One other question also for the Office of Community Wealth Building. I think it's a wonderful addition to what we are trying to accomplish out there. There was a specific change that we made when we decided the tax liens would no longer occur. And we had discussed that cases from, I think, Treasury, I guess, in terms of its source, would then refer them over to the Office of Community Wealth Building. But I don't necessarily see any of that documented in here in terms of the referral process and how we would ensure that those folks get connected as a strategic initiative to assist our folks. So Mayor or Dr. Campbell, if you can talk a little bit about how we hope to work through that process, that would be helpful.
So specifically, the goal was for individuals that found themselves in hard times as it pertains to paying their taxes, we would refer them to the financial empowerment centers so that they can get connected with a financial counselor. And we talked about this prior, it was supposed to be for next year, given the fact that we were intended on selling the tax liens for this year, but the COVID hit. And so we can make sure that that goes into effect for the July 1st budget year, and we can add some tracking data to see how many people are referred over, how many people actually take advantage of those as well. But we do have a number of people that have actually signed up for financial empowerment centers, and I believe that we have Brad Willows that's on the line, who's the director of that particular program. Brad?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. I can add just some basic numbers because I know someone asked how the program was going so far. I can say that in the first few months of operations, we've already done about 600 counseling sessions with about 260 clients, and that was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We really had to scramble pretty quickly to change around our operations, and be able to serve people virtually, and not being on sites with our partner organizations was a challenge. But things are going really well. And to answer your question, Councilmember, I have been talking with the policy director, Kelly Maturko, about implementing that referral stream from folks who might be struggling to pay their taxes. And now that we've kind of figured out the remote operations and things are back to the new normal, we should be able to implement that without any issues from the July 1st deadline. And then we can also build in a specific tracker, like the mayor said, within our database to understand, how many people are actually coming through that referral stream, what their full demographic and financial picture looks like, and we can start to do some analysis there. And I also just wanted to mention that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the counselors have really had to adapt, and we've now kind of pivoted to be able to provide more specific services to meet the needs of the moment. And that includes making referrals to different community organizations that are focused on helping people through financial challenges with the pandemic, helping people with their unemployment assistance, doing mortgage forbearances, all of the, kind of issues that have come up in the last few months. The counselors are doing a really great job at that as well. So the program has been going great, and we look forward to continuing to build and develop as we move forward.
Great, thank you. I most certainly think that if we can start it early, or now that these things have occurred, that would be great. I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you. Councilmember Lupien.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. I just want to preface them by just saying how much I appreciate the work that everyone is doing. I see you, I appreciate you. So this is for the office, the OPI. It talks about measures to increase transparency, efficiency, and accountability, and just wondering which measures, just say a little bit more about the measures being implemented.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, the idea behind the efficiency and accountability and transparency really relates to how we do our work on a day-to-day basis. Also, our information is compiled every year and placed in an annual report. It's also our audits, once they're approved by the law department, are provided on our website as well.
Thank you. My next question is more of a detail about, talks about there's 75 implemented audit findings last year, but only 10 this year. I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
What page are you on? I'm sorry, Mary.
Oh, it's 3-7. So we're expecting, so I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. We're expecting to have 75 audit recommendations implemented this year, but only 10 investigative findings and recommendations. So I'm just wondering the difference between those two.
Well, the recommendations implemented is actually a new metric that we're going to start tracking. So based on every audit that we conduct, oftentimes we'll offer recommendations to the department. And we thought, as far as improving our metrics, we could measure how many of those are actually adopted. So that's a new metric that we're putting out for this coming year. And we're shooting for 75% or higher. And because there are times where our recommendations may not be followed based on information that that the departments have that we don't have, and there might be other alternatives. So what was the other question?
Councilwoman, this is Chris Wagner.
Answered my
Just jump in for a second. This is, I just want to point out, that's a percentage indicator.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I missed that part. So that makes a lot more sense now. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next question is about the Department of Data and Analytics. So it seemed, the department name changed, and it seems like there might be a little bit of a shift of the mission. Can you say a little bit about how the work will change if so?
So the Office of Innovation was a office of what we would call research and development, more so. So it was really an office that would basically test out programs. So when we wanted to do Vanpool, they researched the Vanpool program, found a van approved vendor, found the dollars to do that, and actually worked with partners to implement it. Same thing with bike share. Same thing, that we're trying to do with car share and other different programs. Through that process, we also found that there was a lot of external partners that was looking for someone to analyze data, to look at data, and through the RMAPI initiative in particular, that we did a lot of their data analytics. That led us to start looking at our own data. And, how many, as Kate indicated before, how many widgets are we making? How many of those are successful? Are we doing the things that we need to do in each of our departments that would advance the work of our city? Are we doing it the best way? Are there other ways that that other cities are analyzing data and utilizing data, as far as, pothole repair, or, how they actually plow snow, and all those different things that we weren't necessarily utilizing here. We have a lot of different systems that was not talking to each other, or that data that we collect, but we don't do necessarily, we haven't done a lot with it. So what we wanted to do, given the fiscal times that we're in, the changing environment when it comes down to the cities financially, we need to figure out how to do things smarter and not get set in our old ways, and let the fear of moving from where we are now to a different state of affairs, basically deter us from actually making the changes that we need to make. We want to make those changes based on the data and the information. And so being able to have an Office of Data Performance and Analytics helps us be able to make those changes and make those decisions smarter, and have us really look at the things that we should be looking at in order to make budget decisions, and also decisions as it pertains to program funding and other things like that. And so, although it seems like a change is actually an expansion, and it's a focus on what we believe is very, very important to moving our city into the 21st century. Kate, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Nope, not really.
Great, that sounds wonderful. The KPIs that were removed this year about measuring partnerships, funds leveraged, resident feedback, projects executed, and residents impacted, will those be measured somewhere else?
Kate?
So yes, we will still be measuring. We'll still be measuring those things. They're just not really the primary focus of our activities anymore. Largely what a lot of that is coming from is the engagement with the multimodal transportation initiatives. So we will definitely have those numbers flowing through when we get a new bike share provider, and when the car share is stood up, and we always know what the van share participation is. So if you would like to see those at any point, we can provide that. Resident feedback is mostly going to be captured through the open data portal metrics, which we plan to publish on the open data portal itself. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like, but yes, that'll be available. And what was the other point of interest that you had?
It was the projects executed and then residents impacted.
Okay, so the projects executed, to be honest, wasn't what the greatest metric to begin with. It was hard to define exactly what the definition of a true project or an individual project was. So that's why we are, and we're moving toward more discrete, partnerships that are defined by charters rather than, more informal projects. So if folks want to know how many, chartered projects that we created, we can definitely report on that as well.
Thank you. I will just ask one
Last
more.
one.
Last one. This is for community wealth building. Talks about making a headway on lending practices and making them more accessible and culturally inclusive. I'm wondering if you could give an update on that, and then what are the systemic change initiatives that were completed?
Got you. So in our first year, we began the process of working with several banks and Redco to begin to build a revolving loan fund, which actually is going to be launching pretty soon. That moved access to capital for revitalizing our corridors, to an organization, Redco, as you know, that's now having new leadership and its own staff, with the flexibility that traditional banks have not had in terms of trying to serve the businesses in our community. So that's one of the ways, the revolving loan fund itself. A portion of that that fund I'm responsible for administering through the Resource Partner Enhancement Program. So I mentioned that earlier. About $1.5 million out of that pot held by Redco. So that's one of the ways. Another thing that has been talked about, I've talked to several pastors about this actually, faith leaders, was about implementing the practice of SUSU economics or group economics, where parishioners who are tithe-paying members of their faith institutions, and it's not specifically a Christian practice or anything like that, but faith institutions are predisposed to the opportunity of having their congregations work together. By having them add an additional amount or allocation to their tithes and offerings, the actual faith institution can then obtain things like life insurance for those parishioners, or begin to help them create a revolving credit pool, liquid credit pool, so that they can meet different goals like get rid of their debt or begin to invest in housing or things like that, start businesses together. And so those are some of the activities we're talking to some of our faith leaders about, to do some of those non-traditional, culturally relevant or culturally responsive financial empowerment strategies. As it relates to systemic change initiatives, that directly aligns to the REAL initiative. So a lot of the race, equity, and leadership activities that the change teams are doing has been lodging opportunities for policy change within their departments, offices, and bureaus. And we've been kind of triaging those things out to the various department heads and teams that will be responsible for building projects to move those changes forward.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting.
Councilmember, if I could just add, this is Brad again. I just wanted to add that the banking development, thank you, sir. The banking development district's proposal that the council voted on to support through 5-Star, I think is another really good example of how we can be supporting better and more inclusive lending practices. This is a bank that's coming to us and saying they want to change how they operate and they want to better support the community and actually change how they're lending and change their focus. And I think that's a really good concrete example of how we can be working with financial institutions to change lending practices for the better as well. I just wanted to make sure that went into the record. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have the capability to, kind of evaluate how that goes?
Yes, we do. So we will be working with them throughout both kind of the formal application process to DFS and then through the implementation process as well. So we'll be at the table the whole time, monitoring progress and helping them, along with the Greater Rochester Community Reinvestment Coalition and some other community-based organizations that have been at the table. So we will be right along with them. They'll have stated goals and targets that they're looking to meet within their application, and we'll be helping them on one hand to reach those targets and to figure out how they can implement most efficiently, but also to keep an eye on it and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. And the formal oversight of that will be done by the New York State Department of Financial Services, but we're kind of the boots on the ground for them.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. And before I go to President Scott and then Vice President Lightfoot, I want to say, Dr. Campbell, you mentioned the how faith communities can play a role in economic development. My father's thesis 50 years ago for seminary school was the power that religious institutions could play in building economic development in neighborhoods. And I have a copy of that thesis that I'd have to get to you, because that is really an excellent way to build economic developments by using faith-based and religious institutions. And there's examples of that actually in this region. In Buffalo, there's a church, for example, that has a subway and a bunch of other economic development things. So that's something that definitely should be explored or encouraged from. Obviously, there's a separation of church and state, but the city could definitely encourage those types of things going forward. President Scott, you had some questions?
Chairperson Evans, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's exactly one of the things that we are working on. Tracy Miller and the Neighborhood and Business Development team has had several meetings with different churches and they are becoming community development corporations, CDCs. We currently, council actually voted on one partnership that is with Zion Hill to build a new housing development for senior citizens in the Southwest. We are in the process of working with First Genesis in the Northeast to build not only housing, but also a community wealth center as well as economic development program for them. And so in the next coming year, you will see a number of the different faith-based organizations partnering with the city as well as our local developers to bring forth the different changes that we're seeing in places like Buffalo. Actually, Bishop Pridgeon, the president of Buffalo City Council, came down and had a number of meetings at City Hall with a number of our faith leaders across the board about how we can actually develop that and get our churches more involved in community development. On many of our most challenged neighborhoods, we have a number of different faith-based organizations or churches, and we wanted them to take ownership of some of our neighborhoods, and we've given them the platform on which to do so. And many of them have stepped up, and that includes, I believe, your church, Enon, looking at, doing some development and support with the Bull's Head development. So that, I know your father will be shining down on us and saying, job well done to our faith community and the city when those projects become to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a way to be. I mean, it could transform the city in ways I don't even think people can imagine. Vice President Scott, and then Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. 3-10, I'm curious about the KPIs, the significant deviations for number 4 and number 7. If you could explain those, please.
Individuals, families, businesses receiving direct coaching and referral to other support services.
Right, going from 500 to 1,000, or from 342 to 1,000. Right.
Okay, so I'll let so that includes the financial empowerment centers, and our goal is to actually build those up. Because last year we only had a half a year of really launching those, and then we had the situation where we had the COVID situation hit. We were delayed, but our plan is to be able to serve 1,000 people or have 1,000 contacts. So that's how that would go. I will let both Dr. Campbell as well as Brad talk about that. But that's what we're talking about, as well as what our partnerships with Sourcelink. Sourcelink is, of course, the entity that is going to build that sort of network between all of our not-for-profit lending institutions. That includes the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship, Ibero Business Development, Urban League, Pathstones, and all those different partnerships. And so many of those programs will be launching in the new year. We thought that they were, we planned on them launching in the 4th quarter of this year, but because of the situation with COVID, we had some delays, but that's why the number would increase. Dr. Campbell, do you want to go, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely, and thank you, Mayor, for eloquently outlining those realities as well. Another figure that contributes to that is the work that Ramonda Gibson Stevenson is doing around jobs and working with employers to try to do recruitment. So far in quarters 1 through 3, we had about, 829 people participate in our recruiting activities. And so that also bloated the number. We didn't have that last year, the prior year. She came into our office July 1st of 2019. And so accounting for financial empowerment centers, our entrepreneur ecosystem building work, and our job figures, those things have adjusted our expectations from 500 to 1,000 and people participating in our programs.
Okay, thank you. And the number 7 with the funds, the leveraged funds going from 500,000 to 75,000?
Yes, and so that's another great question. I appreciate the observation. When I first started, a lot of the funds that we brought in, the funders were not willing or able to give the funds directly to a municipality. And so in the first year, a lot of those funds that came in from like Living Cities, JP Morgan Chase went directly to Redco. And so we saw those as leveraged funds. And so we noticed from that first year that I was here, a lot of the funds were being sent there and not directly to the city. And so for last fiscal year, we said, okay, well, we expect that trend to continue. And so we bloated our leverage dollars as opposed to the dollars coming directly into the city. But because of the good work that Brad's doing with the Financial Empowerment Center, a lot of the funds that came in from local foundations such as United Way and Rochester Community Foundation and ESL and so on and so forth came directly to the city, which then reversed the trend where the funds came into the city and less so Redco. And now we're seeing that that's continuing to be the case as Redco spins off. And so that's why we're splitting.
Those funds that now
It's number
come,
6. It's item number 6.
okay.
So if you
All right.
see the swap.
Yeah, got it. All right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Chairman Evans. Real quickly, first one, I just want to go back real quickly, and I'm not trying to reiterate that our online survey, of course, as Councilmember Ortiz pointed out, definitely shows our digital divide. However, I do want to acknowledge the fact that it does say that, and when we look at how many people were aware of the financial empowerment centers, very few people, based on the survey, I think it says, have you heard about the city financial empowerment centers? 22% said yes, 70% said no. So I would just ask that, Dr. Campbell, what are your strategies that you're currently using to make sure that the financial empowerment centers are reaching this capacity or being utilized by the community?
Okay, thank you, Council Vice President Lightfoot. I'll start that response and then I'll also pass it over to Brad. As Brad mentioned a little bit earlier, our Financial Empowerment Center program was recently launched. And because of COVID-19, we've adapted it to a telephonic and virtual format. And the original design of how we were going to market and advertise the program were all of the different site and referral partnerships that we had, the different locations where the counselors would be rotating, if you will. We also have print collateral, both in English and Spanish, that have been provided to those sites and also helped to be distributed by Ramonda to her network throughout the rec centers and neighborhood service centers and so on and so forth. But also too, in our current normal, we've done also a lot of social media. Just last night, I was on the Bag Live feed on Facebook, and we were talking economic development specifically in our community. And so I use that as an opportunity to plug Financial Empowerment Center. So a lot of those kind of organic social media types of posts and things of that nature are happening. Brad, are there any additional thoughts that you'd like to contribute to how we're marketing Financial Empowerment Center?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councilmember. I just, I want to reiterate that I think actually I'm quite encouraged that 22% of folks already know about the Financial Empowerment Center who are answering that survey. I think that is higher than I would have anticipated this early into the process. In talking with other cities that have launched and managed this program over a long period of time, what they tend to see is that at the beginning of launch and maybe through the first year or so, the vast majority of people who come into the program come in through program partners. And they come in because they're going through a workforce development program, for example, and the Financial Empowerment Center is built into the work stream for them. But what we see is that after about a year, that starts to flip and word of mouth takes over. And a lot of folks who heard about it from someone in their family or someone else in the community will then come into the system and come in and become a client of the FEC. So we are continuing, like Dr. Campbell said, to do marketing through a bunch of different channels. We're now in the process of collecting testimonials from people who have been working with our counselors for a couple of months about their experience. And we'll continue to do that and also pushing it through our program partners. And we do anticipate that as the program develops further, we will see, the word get out through informal channels and through the clergy and other sources.
Yeah, thank you. I actually believe that the number is probably much higher than that, because I know that even myself, I've been touting the financial empowerment centers everywhere I go. And so I just believe that it is much higher, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. Last class question, Mr. Chairman. Under the under the Department of Human Resources and Management, under objective, and this is new to our budget, it says launch financial social wellness initiative to continue the expansion of wellness programs into 5 areas over well-being, mental, emotional, financial, social, spiritual purposes in the 4th quarter. I just want to ask, first of all, I think that this is very timely, launching these particular programs to work with our employees, especially around mental and emotional and financial support, especially since COVID-19 has hit. But I would like to ask, are any trauma work going to be done in this work, and/or who's doing this work? Is this internal? Are we hiring an external person to administer this work? I just would like to know a little bit more about this.
Thank you, Vice President. We are working with MVP, who is our medical administrator, but we also work with a number of other community partners, such as we work with E&I. They are our employee assistance program that we work with. And we also look in the community to see what other programs are out there. There's been some programs that we've put out through telework, through online training for employees to help them in this crisis, the situation that they're going through. Also, I would like to ask Chris Martinelli to expand on that question as well.
Good morning. That is true. What Director Demps mentioned was we do work closely with MVP as our health provider and with Lawley Benefits Group as our broker. They also have their own resources that they offer for these programs. So we do reach out we've supported the financial empowerment program, also through the wellness program. And so we use the EAP program. They also have a lot of resources. So there are many resources that we tap into.
I like, you don't have to tell me.
We've also, just to add to that, we've also been pushing a lot of our Office of Community Wealth Building programs, the financial empowerment centers, especially to employees as well. We tend in the past to push things out externally to our external partners, but we wanted to make sure that our employees knew that we had these services available and that they were eligible for them. So whether that's the financial empowerment centers or even purchasing a home, the first time home buyers program or other things, we wanted to make sure that our employees got that information and knew that they could participate in those programs as well.
Thank you. Just real quick. I'm sorry.
Councilperson, I just want to also say that HR has developed a return to work coordinated committee that has also been reaching out to departments to identify what are the needs in this area that specific departments may have in returning their employees or requests that we have gotten from their employees. So while we've made these available through online training and telework, we're making a conscious effort to reach out to departments as well.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for this work. Thank you for those answers. I just want to reiterate and share that, I've been 20 years on the Rochester Fire Department, and I would say that the culture of the fire department and the police department is very masculine to the point where a lot of people don't like to go to EAP. A lot of people won't go seek out the help and assistance, but I know at least there's been at least 12 or maybe I'll say about 10 in the 20 years that I was on the Rochester Fire Department of suicides on the department. And I know that mental health and oftentimes is a serious issue in both the police and fire. And a lot of times those people don't go out and seek EAP because it's looked at as, oh, you can't handle it, or people look down upon that. So I would love to see how we're addressing those issues of making sure that people are comfortable going and seeking help and assistance around mental health, especially since COVID. We've had firemen that have been attacked by the public. We've had, situations that we've never had before, and people are internalizing these things, and there's a lot of trauma wrapped around that. So I just want to reiterate, thank you for these programs, and I'd like to see in the future how they're working, if we're tracking it, if people are utilizing them, what things can we do outside of the traditional things to get more participation in these type of programs. Thank you.
Absolutely. We are just rolling out a new success coaching program where there is a designated person who was recently introduced through our wellness program, went out to all city employees. And this is a coach, advocate, somebody that is going to be a recognizable face that people can talk to about anything that is, it's not just healthcare, it's anything that they feel they want to reach out and talk to somebody about. So it'll be a familiar face for them.
Okay, and we got a bunch of sections. Dr. Campbell, you want to say something briefly before I go to Councilmember Pio? Go ahead.
Yes, very briefly, because Tassie, I know, is a member of our core team with the REAL Initiative. And one of the things that we've recently launched about 4 weeks ago through our community empowerment aspect of the REAL Initiative is our emotional emancipation circles, which are an offering that was developed by the Association of Black Psychologists and the Community Healing Network for People of African Descent. And they're 90-minute self-help, culturally responsive groups, kind of like a 12-step program for folks who've experienced racial trauma. And so that program is being offered right now every other Thursday virtually through Zoom. And our office is a part of that, that facilitation. So that's also available to our employees. Dr. Archie was actually with us on the 28th, and several other City Hall employees have been attending those. We've done 2 of them so far, and our next one's next Thursday. So that's also very much a part of this work.
Okay, thank you. So colleagues, because we only have about a half hour left in this entire section, feel free to ask questions with the other areas that fall in this. I know we were focused on the mayor's office before, but due to time, feel free to ask any about OMB HR communications. With that, Councilmember Pio.
Thank you very much. Quick question for the HR. In a time when we are letting go of a lot of city employees, we are increasing our HR management personnel by 3 and the budget by about 314,000. Can you speak on that, please, so that we can speak back to our constituents about why that is happening?
Yes, the major increase in HR is the transition of the payroll function coming over to the Human Resource Department. That is the addition of 4 positions. That is being done to streamline the efforts between payroll, benefits, and the staffing units, and in order for us to be more efficient in the work that we're doing. Also added to the department was a deputy director. The deputy director position was added to support the strategic, there are a number of strategic initiatives with payroll coming over, Cronus work that's being done, telework, stabilizing systems in HR so we can effectively address the needs of our employees through the initiatives that we're doing with workforce planning. That additional management was needed in order to be effective in addressing the strategic initiatives within HR itself, but also to be able to support those initiatives with our city departments.
And I'll just like to add that I don't know if you had a chance, Councilmember, to read the Baker Tilly study that was done a year ago or 2 years ago. They really focused on the Human Resources Department and recommended that we reorganize the Human Resources Department to be more responsive to our employees, both those that are coming in and those that are currently working for us. Given the changes that we're making as it pertains to technology, we started Workday, we started Kronos, payroll, all these different things. We needed to reorganize the HR department in order to streamline those services, but make sure that we are responding efficiently and effectively to our employees across the board, which took in this budget last year, we did not reorganize the HR department. We waited a year. And so this is a part of making that Baker Tilly program come to fruition. Last year, we really focused on IT And that's the reason why you have program management, which Margaret oversees in the mayor's office now. That was a recommendation of Baker Tilly. And then IT really separated them out. So we're taking it step by step and implementing these reports that we had already done. One of the things that we are doing in the HR department is really breaking it up so that the HR director can focus on certain tasks, the deputy director can focus on certain tasks, and the chief equity officer can work with making sure that our employees get the support that they need, but also the training and the upward mobility. What we noticed over time is that we had a number of employees that have come to me that say, I went back to school, I got my master's degree, but I'm still stuck. I'm still in the same, clerk 3 position. I have no opportunity for upward mobility. And so we want to make sure that our employees know that we're here to support them. We're here to create an environment where they have the opportunity to move up, to earn more dollars, to move across spectrums in department. But we need to make sure that that is one of the focuses that we make a priority for our employees. And a way for us to do that is some of the work that Kate is doing, the onboarding process of asking many questions when people onboard, but also, tracking those employees that are going to school, getting advanced degrees, and making sure that we assist them when new positions open up. It's one of the things that's difficult when we look at the civil service exam and, individuals that, that take civil service exams. We know that, especially with communities of color, that, that exams and things like that, they don't necessarily do as well on, but we want to make sure that we're responding to those communities and giving them the opportunity, the training, and the foresight to be able to get into these positions that may become available. So I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to review the Baker Tilly study. If not, we will provide that to you so that you can get that information and understand why we are doing what we're doing right now. Many of these changes were in place prior to the changes as it pertains to COVID. And we needed to go ahead and proceed with that so that we can make sure that our city is moving forward.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would love to take a look at that because I just wasn't involved with city council at that time. But I would love to obviously see what's happening. Second question really quickly in regards to the mayor's office. Again, I wasn't involved in the budget last year. It did show that the budget for mayor's office was a little over 4.5 million, but you ended up spending 4.8 million, but then we're having another decrease of the 377,000 roundabout. So was there a grant that we got that we're not going to get this year, or I see a big fluctuation there? What happened that I wasn't here for?
So if you look under the major changes, the adjustment reflects the anticipated grants funding for the financial empowerment centers that was reduced by $369,800. And then also you see 2 full-time positions and 1 temporary full-time position are eliminated due to budget constraints. And so if you look at page 3-11, 3-12, it outlines those changes in the budget and where those dollars actually went and came from.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you. So one of the questions that I have is around the language access. And while I am thrilled that we continue to add bilingual titles to our administration, my question really is around the policy around bilingual titles and language access. Because, as we're adding folks and I look at this list, my fear is from year to year that we so happen to have someone who does have the capability of language. Therefore, we put on comma bilingual or / bilingual. And if that person so retires or gets changed or leaves, then that particular capability is lost. So Tassie, can you help me understand, do we have a specific policy around when we add or remove folks that are required for language access within departments?
We don't have a policy. It's associated with duties. and usually access to the community, and having that additional language, being able to be bilingual helps in those situations where the individual reaches out in the community. So it may be in a receptionist role where they're dealing with a number of community people that come in that are bilingual, so they add that. But we do not have a policy around a title or a position being bilingual.
So
And
I
just want to add to that, because I think that is, if you remember Councilmember Ortiz, the Baker Tilly's report of really developing policies and procedures. And that's the reason why, we really focused on a chief equity officer this year. We're really looking at the racial equity and leadership work, and departments taking a deep dive into that. That is something in the next year that we are going to be working on, and that our chief equity officer will be looking at. What policies do we have in the city that do we have? Which ones don't we have that we need? And how do we become more responsive? And the Baker Tilly really focused on our HR policies across the board. And that's what we're going to be working on in the next year.
I'm very glad to hear that, because I think that if a need exists now with, forward facing to the community. So for example, like on the listing that I received, there's 2 positions within DRIs that are eliminated that say bilingual on here. And then there's a security guard added in a different one that says that's being added bilingual. Again, there may or may not be a need wherever, in terms of what people are looking at. But if there's a need now, there probably will be a continued need. So having an official policy that says if that particular person with those capabilities, for some reason, one or another leaves, we must ensure that we must backfill it with another person of that, same capability on there. So I look forward to seeing that. I think it's definitely something that's needed, so that we don't get ourselves into this trap of, so as long as you do speak, then we can add it. And then if you don't, it gets removed. The need is still there. So I definitely encourage us to do that. Tassie, one of the other questions that I have on here is my annual question of rehired retirees on here. So thank you for the listing. Again, another policy question. When do we have something that states how long someone can or should be on the rehired listing? There are some folks on here that have been rehired for a decade on here. And so part of this helps me, or makes me think about what our succession planning is, to ensure that new folks are trained and that work is absorbed, or new positions are created, whatever it is. But it just would seem that we would have enough folks, or we would be doing succession planning to transition this work over. Do we have a policy or something guiding us in terms of how and when we rehire retirees?
There are 2 different, we would really have to look at who is on the list, because there's 2 different situations where rehired retirees come back in. It may be during a transition phase, but it also could be if there's a part-time job and a retiree. We have some retirees that would show up on that list, and they're exam proctors. So they're rehired retirees, but they're working at exam proctors, or they could be working in part-time or seasonal positions. So while that number may be there to transition, we would really need to look at what the role that the individual is doing, because it's not always in a job where they're keeping a new person from coming into the organization.
Just to add to that, I'm sorry, but just with HR, I would definitely refresh everybody's memory on the Baker Tilly study that deals with a lot of that. I think that, Councilmember, you make a great point on the cross training and other things that need to happen. And that is something that we're trying to do across the board. Just because one person leaves with a skill set doesn't mean that that's the same skill set that we need to come in. And so we're reevaluating that as we hire new people. In the next year, you'll see some of those changes take place, and really looking at what is it that we need as a city to have our community be able to work harder, our employees be able to come in understanding that just because it might have been this position the first time, the second time, they may be doing 3 different tasks instead of just the one. That will be coming forth in the next year as we change and redevelop the HR department. And some of these changes that you see this year come into fruition is truly about that cross-training, making sure that we're hiring people for positions that can be cross-trained and be utilized in other ways, but also looking at those rehires and employees that have retired and are possibly coming back just for a period of time or transitioning out. Some of those employees have, as you know, we still are on the mainframe. Some of them have some technical skills that we need to keep internal and keep working because of some of the jobs that we still are tied to because of past technology. And so as the director indicated, we would really have to look at specifically at the person and the job that they're doing. And many of them are possibly on call. So they're not working every day, but if we have a situation where we need to call them back, they will come in and help us out.
Okay, thank you. And I have one last question on here. Again, I'm sure this is probably work that the equity officer will take on. Thank you for the additional charts in terms of total workforce and our diversity numbers, if you will. I really would implore us to dig into some of these areas. If we, as we talk all of the time about our diversity efforts around recruitment within our public safety positions, so too as it should be within our administrator, professional, technician, all of the categories for which was provided. And I appreciate the comment of the efforts that we would like to undertake regarding the Latinx community. The professional, the G20 category is less than 6% in terms of the those who are of Hispanic or Latino heritage, which is obviously nowhere near what population is reflective of the community. And the same thing when you look at these, African Americans represent about 40% of our population, are less than 15%, less than 10% in some of these categories. So again, just I guess editorial comment on here that the work that particular person would be doing, if they could dig into some of these as well for recruitment efforts, I think that would be a huge effort towards our real initiative.
Yeah, and we will definitely.
Absolutely. We will definitely be looking at that. We do know that there are some categories that we need to work in, and there are some categories where we're doing really well. And so I don't know if Dr. Archie is still on the line, but if he wants to talk a little bit about the chief equity work that he plans on doing and what he started already here, I would give him the floor to do so now.
So thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate the opportunity to briefly speak, but you are absolutely correct. We're going to look at our current strategies that we have in place and actually going to assess those to see what is working and also what's not working. And we're going to have to make those decisions to say we need to develop or look at the gaps of those things that determine what are and what is not working. One of the things that we're going to try to do more of is implement sort of active recruitment strategies, which means not just sending out communications through online platforms and resources, but beginning to build more engagement and more pipelines. So not just sending a post to higher ed institution, but actually going to some of the colleges and meeting with the degree granting personnel, the deans themselves, so that we're getting in front of the faculty and we're getting more engaged and involved to establish those pipelines. Getting deeper ingrained into some of those pipelines is also some of the work with the K through 12 section that we're starting earlier with, talking about these opportunities so that we're actually growing and building our workforce internally as well as externally within our local community partners. So it's looking at a lot of assessment and using data to help drive some of those decisions and really being meaningful in how we are analyzing and interpreting that data to develop strategies that are really effective and measuring them all along the way. So I look forward to leading this work, but also partnering with council as well as the community to help build some of these strategies and put them in place. So thank you for asking.
Thank you, Dr. Archie. I also just want to note that, we have done a great job of, even though we have more work to do, we have the most diverse city hall than we've had in my tenure in history. We've done a great job of recruiting in the fire department, more people of color, as well as in our police department. And, you know, we started the process and we want to take it to the next level. We look at people in administrative offices as well as in across the spectrum. We do have areas that need improvement, but overall, I think that we've come a long way from where we started. And those numbers need to be reflected, even though we have places that we need to focus on. And that's the work that Dr. Archie is going to focus. We definitely need to recognize the great work that has been done by our leaders and our department heads to intentionally look at diversity and bringing those people in that are going to work to make sure that our city reflects, our city employees reflect the community that it serves.
I think it's also important, as the mayor has said, we have done significant work in the last 2 years, and the chief equity officer coming in, continuing to work with Let's Get Real, working on workforce planning. That's a part of Let's Get Real, and having those workforce planning teams in each of the departments and being embraced by department leadership has also added to the advances that we made. And as the mayor has said, there's definitely more work to be done, but it should be recognized of the great work that has been done over the last 2 years and continue to be done and expanded on by Let's Get Real with the chief equity officer and our city departments.
Thank you. The council member, Dr. Gruber.
Thank you very much. I have a ton of questions and not a lot of time. So I'm just going to state them for to be answered in writing. And there's one question I would like specifically to ask the mayor and Justin Roy about communications. But BJ, I'm assuming you're going to take notes on some of these things for the follow-up questions. So Chris, in terms of ONB, I'm wondering what happens if there are FEMA or HEROES Act dollars that come in, what the OMB's strategy would be to add those dollars. I know we didn't plan for any. If there'll be a budget mod at some point, or if it's really going to go to fund our reserves. I'd also love to just see for in writing, Chris, why we ended up moving the homestead versus non-homestead tax rate. And I know you already gave an answer in the mayor's hearing, but just seeing that in writing would be helpful for me. When it comes to HR, I want to understand, there's talk about applicant tracking. I have heard from people over the years about applying for jobs at the city and not hearing anything back. And I just want to know if there's a plan to make sure that everyone who applies, regardless of their result, is in fact contacted afterwards. I'd like to welcome Dr. Archie and just have a quick understanding of what the difference is between the job description for the affirmative action officer and the chief equity officer. I'd just like to see what the major additions to the job description are. And finally, when it comes to communications, I'd love to see from Justin in writing why the communications office is the place where the work around New Americans, engagement of New Americans lives. But I can see that in writing. I'd also like to understand why there's been a drop in TV and radio, or TV and video touch points in our KPIs. I think especially because of COVID, I would expect those numbers to increase and not decrease. But the one that I really want to have a quick discussion about is specifically special events. I am a little bit concerned when I see this budget in general. It doesn't seem as though there's a whole lot. By the way, I want to say the budget is incredible for how much you all have woven COVID in every regard. But the one space that I don't see any major discrepancies from last year to this year is special events. And I think we're all expecting there to be some major differences in the way that we run special events as a city, especially as long as we're not allowed to have major congregating. And we, just look at professional sports. There's not going to be a Rochester Red Wings season for all we know, or things like that. So I'm eager to understand what the plan is for special events and why the numbers seem to stay relatively similar from last year. And in fact, there's even an additional body being added to the special events office.
Justin, if you're speaking, you're on mute, but I'll start off with So as you know, our budget year is July 1 to June 30th. And right now, the events that are scheduled for August and September, some of them have not been canceled. So that's the Rochester Music Fest, Summer Soul Festival, the Fringe Festival hasn't been canceled. And so because they haven't been canceled, depending on what happens with COVID, we definitely wanted to keep those dollars available in case they proceed and go forward. And next year, of course, in June, hopefully June of 2021, we would still have the Jazz Festival. So there are different events across the spectrum that we haven't necessarily decided yet, depending on what the governor outlines as it pertains to 4th of July festivities and things like that. Rather, we would be doing fireworks or not. So there's a number of different things that are because of the budget year and when things happen that are budgeted for, even though they may not happen, but we just want to make sure that we have the dollars allocated just in case they are able to proceed. And as you can see, the communications department has changed a number of different employees and the work and transition different people out on them. If you look at their personnel summary on 3-28, you will see the changes there. And so they will be getting rid of 2 positions and just adding 1. And so Justin can talk a little bit more specifically about those changes. Justin? You're still on mute if you're talking. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mayor. I was unmuting. Yeah, as it relates to the department to meet the budgetary requirements that we put forth, we shifted personnel and actually eliminated personnel to meet those budgetary requirements. As it relates to the employee that will be working in special events, that employee actually will serve as the admin for the overall office. They will provide special event support during the special event season, but their primary role will be to serve as an admin. And that actually, that was what a part of our personnel reductions to reduce costs was to support special events and then also provide that admin role. But as the mayor stated, overall, we have our personnel is reduced in the communications department.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lupien.
Yeah, I have a question about Redco. Will the public meetings and I guess it's for law, right? The public meetings and finances be available to the public as they were when it was under the city?
Yes.
Okay, great. And follow-up question, what's the relationship between Redco and the city? Will they still have access to city resources? How will we support them?
So Redco right now is it's separate entity, but they still will be working as a partner of the city, sort of like Comida works with the county of Monroe, to be able to do economic development the way that and drive economic development in the city of Rochester. We needed an entity that could make investments and also receive grant dollars that, as Lomax had or Dr. Campbell had indicated before, many not-for-profit organizations or foundations don't provide dollars to government. And so in order to get economic development dollars through grants and other things, we needed to transition Redco into its own entity. But they will work in partnership with the city's neighborhood and business development department. Currently, our finance department is still in charge of Redco's finances until they are able to secure an entity to actually do their finances, but they're still going to have public meetings and other public information will still be available for the corporation. But our goal is really to focus on our commercial corridors. If we look at in the past, the city has needed to go first when it comes down to a lot of the investments that take place in our neighborhoods, rather that's housing, economic development, and then private industry comes in and they follow. Redco has made a partnership with an organization that's called Chicago Trend, really transform some challenged neighborhoods, especially commercial corridors in Chicago. They are coming here and creating Rochester Trend, working with a number of different foundations to really look at our commercial corridors, talk to our residents about what it is that they want to see on their commercial corridor, and bringing in those partnerships that we need in order to make it happen. As we have heard over the last couple of weeks, is not the first time we've heard it. We've been working on this for a significant period of time, where people feel like people in the community don't own certain businesses in the neighborhood. They want to open up different shops. They want to be consulted. There's certain things that they want besides corner stores and other things. We want to be able to provide that variety of selection in businesses, in neighborhoods. And this is a way for us to be able to do that, and to work, and for Redco to lead that charge and that investment into our neighborhoods in a way where the dollars will not necessarily come from the taxpayers on this side, but actually come from private entities and have us access dollars that we did not have access to before.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Okay, we can take a couple more minutes for any last minute questions that people might have before we move on to DES. If there are any last minute questions, feel free to ask them now. But as to what I said earlier, obviously we have a system to track last minute questions, and then we also have a third day on the calendar if anybody has any last minute questions that they may want to ask. The only thing I wanted to do, because we are in such a unprecedented situation as it relates to what's happening in the world, Chris, if you could just touch on I think it's important for people to understand how you had to work on crafting this budget just broadly, and then touch on how we're planning for any changes that might happen. We know that we are praying and hoping that we don't get any last minute cuts from the state, but we know that that has been out there for both school districts as well as municipalities. But Chris, if you touch on that very briefly from a planning standpoint. And I say that because I think people need to understand that the city is operating with finite resources, and they've been doing a great job of planning in this area, but the pot is not imminent. So we have to be extremely strategic. And I know OMB, along with the mayor's team, has been working at doing that. So Chris.
Sure, and I want to first mention, the mayor laid out in her mayor's message, right, how she addressed the crisis when it first came up, right? So we realized it was going to be a crisis that transcended fiscal years. So we were dealing with it both in the 1920 budget as well as the 2021 budget. So when we looked at things we did was we locked down discretionary spending early on to help curtail expenses. We got into a lot more of a hard hiring freeze and really hiring only essential positions. We went through the whole exercise of identifying once the assistance came to us from the government, the federal government, in terms of additional help on unemployment. We looked at furloughs and job share as a way to help the city's finances without doing harm to employees. And so those are sort of the initial steps that were taken as we forecasted revenues around sales tax and state aid. We made some assumptions there, and the situation continues to be dynamic, right? So we addressed it in terms of reducing cash capital overall, and as we look at what may come with cuts to state aid, we assume some reductions in the current year. There've been some discussions around potentially the state delaying AIM payments in June. We're due about almost $88 million in June. If that is ultimately delayed, The good news is, we do have a relatively strong cash position, but, $87 million is a big hit. So we would look at, potentially, issuing a revenue anticipation note for that to help get through from on a cash basis. And then as other change, again, this situation is dynamic. If we do get additional resources from the federal government, we'll certainly be, talking to the mayor and see how we want to deal with that. But the biggest concerns are around the revenue streams for sales tax and state aid. Again, we've talked about the three legs of our three-legged stool there. And so trying to make sure that we have a good handle on those revenue streams and adjusting any additional dollars that come in, making sure that we've got a good handle on what those revenue streams are going to be, will impact how we can deal with additional dollars. But we've also got some of those other things in place where, in the new year, we also have the ability to sort of lock down some expenses and continue that hiring freeze. So those are some of the tools that we have to deal with some of the uncertainty. Does that answer your question?
It does, and thank you. I just think it's important for folks to really know what we're dealing with here, and I think that paints the broader picture in terms of what's happening almost in real time. So thank you. We're going to take. Well, how about Madam Mayor? Did you want to add anything?
Yes. I just wanted to follow up on a question that Vice President Lightfoot had asked earlier about the phone calls for the teletown hall. We actually made 3,000, almost 13,000 calls to landlines and also 12,000 calls to mobile numbers. And so we did also clean up the list because we were calling numbers that were outside of the city of Rochester. And so that's why you see a reduced number of calls to a reduced number in that. So we'll make sure that that number reflects the actual number of those that were called as landlines and those that were called as mobile numbers. We did see an average increase from people that participated in the call and the minutes they participated in the call as well. So just wanted to make sure that I got him that information.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. So let's take I know everyone. Let's take like a 5 to 7 minute stretch break for everybody, and then we'll get back together in about 7 minutes, and then we'll start with DES. Thank you, everybody.
Just a quick note for some of the folks that just joined us from DES. I want to make sure that you know that we are just taking a quick 5 minute break as we transition. I know that you all just got let in, but we will be restarting shortly in about 5 minutes. Kabute, are you available?
I'm here.
I have a Simmons J in the waiting room. Is that part of your team?
Yes. He can watch from YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is everyone back?
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm ready. Let's do this.
great. Commissioner Jones, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's a different type of budget session, but we'll get through this.
We'll get through this. It is very strange not seeing everybody's face. And I was saying to council members before earlier this morning that we'll have to have a big celebration when we're able to see each other all together again. So I do want to thank you for being on the line along with your team during this difficult time. As you know, we're doing this through video conference, which will which presents its challenges, but we're soldiering through it. So Commissioner Jones, I want to turn it over to you to maybe introduce your team and then make any statements that you might want to make. And then we'll get right into questions from council members, and council members will handle this section the same way we did the last one. If you have questions, if you can just submit them to me by saying that you have a question, and then I'll put you on the list, and then I will call on you, and we'll take it from there. We'll go for about the next hour and a half, try to go to about 12:45, and then we'll break for lunch. So Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Councilperson Evans. Really appreciate the opportunity to present Department of Environmental Services budget this year. But before we get started, I want to introduce the key staff members. They're members of the senior group for the Department of Environmental Services. We start off with the Deputy Commissioner, Anthony Orfe. He oversees buildings and parks and cemeteries. Next to Anthony Orfe and in my sequence will be Calbateo Conte. He's the Assistant Commissioner. And then Angelica Stringer, she's a Senior Admin Analyst who does our HR. And then we go to our bureau heads, Patrick O'Connor, he's our Director of Water. Then we have Joseph Ladelfa, he is our Director of Fleet Services. Holly Barrett, the City Engineer. We have Ann Spalding, she's the Manager of DEQ. We have Louis Tobias, he is our Manager of Telecommunication. We have C. Carbonell, Director of Fleet Services. Last but not least is Karen St. Alban. I chose to call her out last because right now Karen is just completed her 40th year of service with the City of Rochester. And
congratulations.
I think that's special, and she's just a real key team member. 40 years of service to the City of Rochester is something that's outstanding, and she is just as important and as committed and as vibrant as ever. And she's just amazing, and she's a real key member. So I just, that wouldn't get, Karen, I take this opportunity to acknowledge you in front of City Council and everyone else for the amazing work that you do on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Commissioner, Karen is still smiling after 40 years. So I need that elixir that you have that keeps you 40 years of service. So if I can have that, that'd be great. I also see that Mr. Jim Brown from the Convention Center that's also here in our meeting. Mr. Brown, welcome.
We have Jim Brown from the Convention Center, and we also have Rob Mentor from Pagula Sports Entertainment. He's a vice president in charge of the actual Rochester operations. So we have those two individuals also joining us.
Good, and I hope the gentleman from Pagula Sports Entertainment has brought the record that the Buffalo Bills are going to have this year, because I may ask that question when we get to that. So,
well, we'll see what kind of answer I have ready for you.
Okay,
it's an optimistic one.
I'm saying 11-5, Mr. Mentor. 11-5.
I like that. Champion, so. I like that a lot. I like where your head's at.
Good, thank you. Council members, with your indulgence, we'll start with your questions. I just want to start with a broader question, Commissioner Jones, before we go into section 7.1 through 7.15. Well, actually, I think this can fall right under the Commissioner's office. Can you talk a little bit about how you all have had to adapt with the COVID-19 situation, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we all know is still happening, hence why we're meeting by Zoom. I mean, obviously, you're an essential business. You can't stop refuse collection and running the water bureau and everything else that's happening. So can you talk about that, and then any impacts that may have had in this coming budget or going forward?
Well, Chris, I see Chris got up and walked away when you asked that question. Because this is a tale of two budget submissions. We made initial budget submission that was submitted in February. That was before COVID. And then because of the circumstances surrounding our financial situation with COVID, we had to make another submission. And this one was heavy on basically making some personnel moves and decisions that resulted in some basically some creative ways of meeting our additional cut number that we had to come up with. It's been a journey of being, I think, fluid and flexible as we dealt with the COVID crisis. We had a number of guidances that came out initially, and then as each guidance came out, we had to make sure that we made adjustments to our staffing, made adjustments to the way we did work, made adjustments to our spending, and along with keeping continuity of service. We looked at ways of working with our labor. We looked at ways of making sure that staffing was protected. And we also looked at how we're going to keep these projects going on. Because we were in the middle of major projects when COVID started, i.e. the work at the skate park, the work at the La Marqueta, the work at Rundell Terrace. All these things were ongoing. And during a construction project, if there's any delays, and the delays are basically caused by us stopping the work, there's financial penalties associated with it. So it was important that we kept a continuity of work and continuity of that workflow going. And we were able to do that with the help of our state representative from ESD, and we kept the flow of work going. Because we would have stopped the work and had delays, the impact would have been higher costs to the city of Rochester. So we worked hard as a team to keep the continuity of work flowing. We picked up all the trash. We had to make some adjustments to how we handle trash. We called a moratorium on bulk collection for a while to make sure that we kept our ESOs, who are our sanitation workers, safe. We made adjustments on how we would actually man our shifts. We kept 3 shifts going, keeping on a winter schedule to keep social distancing going. We made adjustments to our waterworks and how we would actually do meter reads and going out to the field. And we kept our water production and our water distribution systems going. We made adjustments to our security staffing to make sure that we had adequate staffing and that we enforced social distancing and made sure that we're there keeping the flow of government going on at our various city facilities that we operate.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And we'll start with questions with Mr. Vice President. Vice President Lightfoot, you had some questions.
Thank you, Chairman Evans. First and foremost, I just want to say that, first of all, congratulations, Karen. I think that's an amazing feat. That's pretty amazing. And you're an amazing person anyway, too. And I want to, since we're talking about COVID-19, I think we should transition into a statement and then my question. Commissioner, I just can't speak to the amazing work that you guys do enough. But I will say this because he was talking about how you guys have been working under these conditions. And I would say what we saw over the weekend and the work that DES did for thousands of our citizens coming out from all walks of life on Sunday morning with less than an hour notice, and how we worked together and how your team put that together and just made things happen and made it flawless. And we were able to clean up our city in less than 24 hours. To me, what that did to the spirit of our community, it has to be recognized, and can't talk about it enough. And the feeling that, especially after Saturday night, our community needed that, and our community responded, but they would not have been able to do that had it not been the work for your team. So I just want to say that we appreciate you, brother. We appreciate you, your team, all that you guys do for our community. I'm gonna say that before I beat you up.
Can I respond first?
Sure, of course.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to you, and thank you to my committee chairperson, Mitch Gruber, because you guys are out there right with us, handing out supplies, directing traffic, and sending people to different parts of our city. And I thought that was amazing. I thought that worked well for us, and I really appreciate the camaraderie and just the support of seeing you guys there and saying, way to go, and giving us a pat on the back. That was truly community. That was truly something special. and I'm not going to get welled up because it was something that was very touching, and it shows that our community is special, and what happened on Saturday night does not define us.
I agree. So not to put any salt on the situation, no pun intended, but I noticed that our salt is going up significantly, and I would like to know why is the increase in salt, and/or are there alternatives that we can use that are less expensive than salt? Of course, you know, we're living in this climate where we know we need these things. We know what it does to our streets and to our roads after we spend a lot of money trying to fix them. And so I'd just like to for you to expound on the expense of it, and are there alternatives that we can look at in the future to decrease some of those costs?
Well, salt is a commodity. Like all commodities, it's supply and demand. And as we deal with supply and demand, they have ebbs and flows. And it's based on how much salt was used the previous year. I project that salt prices should go down next year because we had, you know, a relatively mild winter, although we were the snow capital of America this year, although we're only 3 inches below our normal average. You know, we normally get about 100 inches of snow each year. This year we got 97, 96.7, so say 97 inches. So it was an average winter, although it probably seemed lighter, but we did get snow, we did use salt. But from a regional standpoint, the demand or the use of salt went down because it wasn't a very cold winter. So that's when you use a lot of salt to stop the icing. We have looked at alternatives to salt, like in Pennsylvania, they use sand, and some parts of Canada, they used to use cinder. But you have to realize once you start putting different materials down, you change the ecosystem, and you change the way that things work. Our current pure water sewer system is set up to deal with salt and the residuals from those chlorides as part of their process. Then you start adding sand to the mix or other chemicals to the mix. You may have a change in the way the actual sewer system works. We have and always have adhered to a sensible salting guideline that says that at X number, at this temperature, at this amount of snowfall, we salt at this amount of salt per lane mile. So we have that available on our AVL system, where we can look at and monitor the salt usage. So what we try to do is be very data driven on how we use salt, when we use salt, and making sure that we're getting the most out of salt. Right now, we have salt at our salt barn from what we've had left over from this past winter, ready for the next winter. But I think if you look at pure economics, supply demand, we should see a lower cost for salt next year.
Okay, part two, and I'm done, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask a question on the dig policy, or do I have to wait till later?
Is that related to a particular section? Question overall.
It's question overall. I can wait till later if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to know if it's possible for us to get a copy of the one dig policy, and how's the communication taking place concerning that policy? Who are our current partners, and who would we like for to be partnering for the master license agreement?
Okay, it's not a policy yet. It's a dig once strategy that we're utilizing. And what we're doing is making sure that people are taking advantage of what we've done with the appurtenances within the right of way. That's part of our overall strategy. Eventually, we will get to a dig once policy. Before we do that, we have to go through these steps of basically inventorying what's in our right of way. That's what we presented to you guys last year in regards to making sure that we have the ability to monitor and assess the appurtenances within the right of way. The appurtenances are manhole covers, catch basins, gas valves, water valves, those things. And right now we're currently in a position internally. We've been able to monitor and basically categorize over 20% of our appurtenances within the right of way. And we've even worked with local utilities to make sure that that they are adhering to that policy and making sure that they are taking advantage of the opportunity to secure their appurtenances. Now, what we have done is we reached out to all the utilities, and we do utilities coordination meetings every 6 weeks or so, in which we tell them this is what's going on within our right of way. This is what's happening within our right of way. You have a chance to run your telecom, run your sewer, run your traffic, run anything that's in that right of way now before we dig it up, or while we're digging it up. And then once we maintain it and put it back and resurface it and put in new curbs and new gutters and put in down new asphalt, you go back in there, you're going to be required to restore that street to a level that's specified within that permit process. So that's where we're at, and that's how we're getting to the actual core of the dig once policy, and we're giving people an opportunity to know about what's going on. And every time we issue a permit, as part of the permit application, they have to adhere to our rules and regulations, and that's how we're getting the information out. Anytime you go into that office, you want to get into our right of way, you have to get a permit for that. So our permit office is the most effective way of getting that information out, and also what the actual law, law that we put in will actually allow you to see where that's at. But we'll give you an update. I'll have Louis Tobias from our team send you where we're at with that. And then in regards, and then the master license agreements, that's something that's been in place for a while, and we're continuing to have people adhere to that.
Thank you, yes, thank you, Mr. Jones, Commissioner Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gruber, 71715.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to say, I know Commissioner Jones has been jonesing to wear a suit and tie. So I'm glad you were able to finally get dressed up for the day. And Karen, I didn't know when you started, labor laws allowed 6-year-olds to work. So congratulations on your 40 years. I just want to, I want to ask a question, but I also want to comment on what VP Lightfoot said about the great work of the cleanup on Sunday. On top of that, what I think a lot of people don't know is how much work DES does outside of their normal scope of work, including yesterday, meeting a group of volunteers over at Peace Village, the homeless encampment, and doing a really extensive job of a cleanup. And I just want to say hats off to the team on doing that work. I met Karen and Louis there yesterday morning, and it looks great over there now. So thank you all. I do have several questions later on in the section, but when it comes specifically to the Office of the Commissioner 7.1 to 7.15, I'd like to make a comment and then just a quick question. The comment is back to the point about the dig once policy and the master license agreement. I know that I'm a little bit of a broken record about this, but during last month with Greenlight, I continually said that I think the master license agreement is an important way to build relationships with these different industries and utility providers. But that relationship should also lead us, I think, to be able to use the carrot and the stick one way or another to ensure that we have some equal service across the city. And I'm still disappointed with Greenlight's response as to how they decide whether or not to go into a neighborhood. It still feels incredibly subjective to me. And I would just ask as a comment for us to spend some time sharpening our pencils and thinking through how we can get them to really commit to not just talking, but committing to going into more neighborhoods. The question is specifically related to the update on the food waste and food scraps study that's been done over the last year. I know there's been a lot of great work on that. And I just wanted to ask you, Commissioner Jones and Ann, if you could give an update on where we are and what's planned for this year.
Okay, we're still in final draft version. And it's been a joint effort with Karen St. Alban, of course, and Ann working on that. And Ann, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Gruber, for the question. So as the commissioner mentioned, we do have our composting feasibility study in draft now. We are reviewing that. The feasibility study includes a waste characterization study of what the composition of our waste stream actually is, so we can evaluate what the reductions may be if we implement a composting program. It also evaluates what other municipalities do for composting programs, so we can look at cities that are similar to ours and make decisions on what would or would not work in our municipality. And additionally, the feasibility study will recommend potential pilots, different ways that we can implement a composting program in the city, and how we might evaluate that program and measure its success.
Is there a chance that any of those pilots are executed or are started this year, or is that something we're looking at the next fiscal year?
Well, that's a possibility. We're kind of doing a wait and see, and that's a possibility. But we want to make sure that we get the final draft presented to everyone, including City Council and most definitely the mayor, before we make any decisions about moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Scott and then Councilmember Lupien.
Thank you. On 7-5, would you please, or maybe Chris or somebody can explain to me the in lieu of depreciation fund reduction, the $1.4 million? Because I'm really interested in how you got your $900,000, how you made your blah with the $900,000 reduction. But then I see this $1.4 million in lieu of depreciation thing taken out. So if you could answer that, and then I've got a couple of others on the same page.
Sure, I'll handle the in lieu of depreciation question. That's specific to the refuse fund. As you know, some of our non-general funds, the enterprise funds, we have a lot of cash capital and a lot of equipment needs there. And so they can fluctuate in terms of the replacement schedule. So rather than have rates jump around, we typically will include like an in lieu of depreciation amount. So we did in the 1920 budget, sort of to even out rates and to continue to build fund balance, right? While there are fluctuations in the replacement schedule. So that's why you see that go down this year, because we did not, because of the replacement schedule and changes in capital, that sort of balance number wasn't needed for the in lieu of depreciation and refuse. So it's a way for us to continue to maintain a fund balance in that fund to be able to deal with the capital needs.
Okay. On the Assistant Director of Operations, how many of those are there, Commissioner?
There's one assistant, there'll be one Assistant Director of Operations. It was a typo that we did not catch. It should have been assistant to the Director of Buildings and Parks. So there's only one. So that's a typo that we corrected, and sorry about that. And it's noted in other parts of the actual document, but that was just a typo. It should have been down here. It should have been assistant to the Director of Buildings and Parks.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lupien and then Councilmember Ortiz.
Hi. Let's see. I just want to say I'm super excited that that CCA, the community choice aggregation, is on the legislation packet for this month, and just wondering, should we approve it, which I hope we do. What's the timeline and implementation plan?
Well, first we have to get it approved by City Council, and then we will look at the actual action plan from the actual consultant that we chose. And then we have to coordinate that with RG&E. There's some things that we'll coordinate with that. And then we'll give you an updated schedule on that. But this is a a major step forward from where we were. We started talking about this, Ann and I started talking about this 5-6 years ago. We introduced the initial draft legislation probably about 2 years ago. And now we're at a point where we do have legislation, we have approval, and we'll be moving forward after this month's council hearing, once it's approved, with an actual updated timeline for you.
Yeah, and just maybe if people are watching at home, it would, to my understanding, it would switch the city over to renewables and pay less because of our ability to bargain.
That's one of the tenets of it, and that's one of the things that we really have to make sure that we talk about during the actual process, making sure that we get the best possible deal as we go for more of a renewable portfolio for our energy purchases.
Thank you. My next question is about municipal broadband. I know we've kind of talked about this before, but COVID has really highlighted the necessity and the disparities around access to internet. And will there be opportunities to kind of partner with other governmental bodies and public partnerships to make sure that our residents can have free access to internet?
I think the mayor may want to answer that question.
Yes, so municipal broadband, the Office of Innovation did a study, and I believe that we had sent that over to council where they looked at this particular issue. It's very expensive. Chattanooga, Tennessee undertook this municipal broadband. It cost over $100 million to actually implement. They actually had a private foundation, I believe it was Coca-Cola, that funded it for them. And really put in all of their municipal broadband. The upkeep also was very expensive. A few years ago, we did a Magellan study where we looked at the municipal broadband, or the broadband that we currently have in the ground, the infrastructure along with the county of Monroe. Currently, that infrastructure cannot be used for for the city to provide that access to the public to that because of the competition with private providers. One of the reasons why we're trying to do these master license agreements and other things is to really look at, not just the dig once policy, but where we are lacking internet access and providing it to our citizens. When we did not just the survey in the teletown hall, but the internet survey and some of the things that we have been talking with the city school district, they did a survey as well. 80% of the people in the city of Rochester said they have access to broadband. But we found that in other cities that even have municipal broadband, that only about 80% of the people actually utilize it. So in that situation, I think we have 70%, here that has it. So it's not something that we are looking to actually implement here because of the expensive nature, but we are very, very focused on making sure that everyone that wants access to the internet can be given access. Last council session, we worked with the city school district, United Way, and council passed funding for us to be able to make sure that our young people that are in school from 5 to K are able to access devices. Our libraries also provide MiFi hotspot rentals so that people can have access to the internet. And so this is something that we're definitely focused on, making sure that people have access to the internet, but not necessarily a municipal owned broadband feature at this point in time. We have been in discussions prior to the COVID situation with a company that looked like they could possibly do something on a private level that could be a partnership with the city, but we have yet to explore that because of COVID.
Thank you for that answer. I have more questions, but I'll just, for now, I'll finish up with this one. Wanted to thank you, Commissioner, for the permanent or the installing the speed humps on parcels again. It makes an incredible difference in just in the day that it's been there. We see traffic slowing down incredibly. And just wondering what the status is on the permanent curb extensions. And I think we were told that there'd be a raised crosswalk at that intersection, and as well if there's an opportunity to do the same thing at Parcells and Stout, where a couple people have died in the last few years.
Well, let me get back to you on those dates and times and give you an update. I'll get back to you on that.
Thanks so much.
Let me go to Councilmember Ortiz, and it seems like just from the nature of the questions that people kind of just want to ask questions on regarding all the sections of DES. So for the sake of time, what I'll do is feel free to ask questions on anything in 7.1 to 765 as it relates to DES, because I see that some of the questions were more broad in the beginning. So Councilmember Ortiz, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll start with the first one that I had in the Office of the Commissioner, though. Can you talk to us a little bit about the loss of the community liaison position? I'm wondering what specifically they were working on and how those activities will be absorbed by other positions.
Well, the losses, it was basically rebracketing that position. So that position is now working on not the dig once, but our overall appurtenances within the right-of-way strategy. And then the position was rebracketed down to a level in which they're working on our Keep Rochester Beautiful campaign, and they're also working on council agenda items. So we just repositioned folks, and we did not get, we didn't change our focus on community outreach and being able to reach out to our community. We really are focusing in on doing things where we can do more outreach. And that was an example, of how we just got people out and we're able to work with people over the weekend. And as we start doing more clean sweeps, mini sweeps, no more clean sweeps for this year, but mini sweeps, that person will be basically working on that. But we haven't stopped that focus, okay?
Okay, so is the community liaison now the project assistant? Where do I see them in the listing then?
The community liaison person is an actual, project assistant. Yes, you're right.
Okay, so have their duties and responsibilities changed to a point that would justify a 23 down to a 12?
Yes, because yes.
It's that should be the senior GIS analyst. The community liaison became the senior GIS analyst. So it's just
right. But the role of the actual community liaison is now the project assistant who's doing Keep America Beautiful and other things, not at the high level with which we were using that current position for.
Okay, maybe we can talk offline. I'm still a little confused, so I won't monopolize the time on this.
No, I'll try to explain it a little bit differently. The role of the community liaison was split. So as Suzanne was indicating, that there is a senior GIS analyst, so some positions went there, some duties went there, and then there's another position that was reduced down to a 12 because the duties were reduced and changed. So that was a position that was created, but that role was split, if you understand what I mean.
Okay, all right, a little bit more. Yes, thank you. So my additional question in this area here is because I was really trying to get a better understanding. I know that we have our CIP scheduled out for specific streets and work that are getting done throughout the years, but how does a resident provide information regarding a concern that perhaps it's something that we hadn't anticipated through the CIP process, major flooding on a street or major issues with something that falls within our wheelhouse that we hadn't anticipated? How does someone go through the process of providing that concern and hearing back specifically about how we might be able to address that in the short term?
Well,
so
basically.
Go ahead, Commissioner. And Go ahead.
Basically, you 311, email, call the office, any of those types of approaches. You would, that's how you do your outreach. And some of the things that we can move very quickly on, I'll give you an example. Got a call about a tree stump back in April on High Street and on a vacant lot that was impeding on someone's fence line. So I said, okay, we'll check it out. He said, by the way, while you're there, look at our street. So we go there, we look at the street, High Street, and I was more concerned about the condition of the street than the actual tree hump. And what we did was, we came in with our in-house staff and had the ability to come in and mill the street, resurface the street. We're actually in the process of changing out some water services, and we'll be finishing off that street sometime before the end of this month. So what you have to do is call in, we do an assessment and make a decision on life safety or if it's a hazard to traffic, and then we make that decision. And if we have to move quickly, we have the ability to move quickly on things.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and that is certainly what we tell folks, but I guess for the follow-up that perhaps hasn't occurred for some folks, do you want those to come back to the commissioner's office, or is there a specific process you would like them to follow if the call has been made, the assessment has been sort of done, but then there still hasn't been additional follow-up? How would you like folks to engage with us and your office to do that?
You can, Councilperson Ortiz, you can always call me, you can always email me, you can always reach out to me. But if you're talking about Weaver Street, that's going to be under design soon, and that's.
I'm not talking about Weaver Street.
That's going to be reconstructed soon. So we're in the process of that, and basically that was an example of an outreach where we went out, the whole team, DES, went out in a bus. We drove the street, we walked the street, we looked at the street. We said, you know what, we got to do something with this street because there was no curb reveal. And that starts the process. We have to go through the process, get the resources, and then fix the street. So Weaver Street is in the process of being designed, and then it's going to be reconstructed, if that was your question.
It wasn't specific to Weaver Street, but thank you. I will follow up with you on folks that reach out to us for that. I'm just trying to figure out the process because I know that you get several requests, and I think sometimes people just like to hear back what is the status, where do they stand, whether it can happen or not. Folks like to be aware of where they stand.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you. All right, good to see everybody today. So Commissioner, I direct your attention to page 7.3. Wonder if we get a little brief update on continue the Inner Loop North study.
Okay, right now we're meeting with stakeholders. We're meeting with all stakeholders from Genesee Brewery to the people that are the trucking industry, to the transportation industry, to all the utilities, from Monroe County to RG&E to RDH, and we're in some of the community stakeholders. So we're still in the process of doing the actual plan analysis and looking at the actual program that what could occur there. I think this opportunity here is going to be amazing. It'll be more dynamic than the first phase of the Inner Loop, and I think
that is a very bold statement, sir.
I think David Gant, Assemblyman David Gant, for coming up with that $1 million for as seed money to get us going on that. And I think that's amazing.
Okay, so the next question is on the same page. Continue use of alternative pavement solutions for road surfaces and sidewalks. If you could talk briefly about that. What alternative pavement solutions are you using?
So we're using permeable pavement applications. Years ago, it was this really big hit on our tree grates. We had people taking our tree grates out and taking them over to Krieger or different junkyards and selling them for scrap. We realized that that was an issue, so we started looking at alternatives. One of the alternatives was this permeable pavement product that we're using now all over the place. It really holds up well, allows the tree to grow without pushing up sidewalks or doing other things. You see it along the inner loop, you see it on cycle tracks. We also look at solutions like making sure that we have permeable pavement processes for some of our parking areas, and that's going to help us divert stormwater. So we're really just thinking out of the box and making sure that we're looking at every opportunity to do things differently, to make things work better for our community. And the actual end product looks very nice.
Same page at the bottom of the page, install 3,200 5/8 inch to 2 inch radio read meters. What percentage of that roughly is that of all the radio read meters that you're looking at doing?
We want to do, we're in a process of replacing all the meters with radio read meters. I think we're probably at around 60%, but I'm not gonna say too much more without, because Pat O'Connor will correct me. I'm gonna ask Pat to give us an update on where we're at with the installs of radio reads.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Patterson, we are at about 71% at present time.
Okay, very good, very good. And my final question on this section is I direct you back into your Bureau of Equipment Services, pages 44 through 46. Particularly specifically, you are adding 4 heavy mechanic 2 positions at bracket 15, and you are cutting 3 master truck technician positions at bracket 71 and 1 master automotive technician position at bracket 70. It doesn't sound like those things are comparable, but they kind of look similar, and I'm kind of worried about the salary implications. Did these people, did the 71 and the 70 retire and they're sitting somewhere in the sun, or what's going on?
All these adjustments and moves will be done through attrition. There will not be any people that are going to be basically laid off by this, and we have a workforce that's younger, and by putting them in positions where they can move up to these higher level positions, that provides them with growth opportunities. Joseph Ladelfa, our Director of Fleet Services, he's on the line. Anything else you want to add, Joseph?
No, Commissioner, absolutely right. Those positions were replaced by people that were either promoted out of, or transferred out, or retired, mainly retired. And you're right, we bring younger people in and they have an opportunity to move up.
Okay, well, thank you. And I just want to give credit where credit is due. That question comes from our crack team of analysis in our council office. They made it possible for us to notice it, and I figured I'd bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gruber.
Thank you. I have a number of questions. I'll try to keep them brief, and then I will close my mouth for the duration of the section. Commissioner Jones, I'd love to just start by asking you a question that we talk about regularly in our committee meetings, but I think is important for folks to hear. I get a lot of questions from folks, especially now that we're in an economic downturn and there is some budget cuts, about why the city continues to move forward with some big construction projects that don't necessarily seem like they're the #1 priority. And I think it'd be very helpful for you to just explain how some of that works from your department's eyes.
Well, first and foremost, you have to understand how these projects are funded. The majority of these major construction projects are funded through state aid or state grants, and we pay a fraction of that. So if you have a $10 million project and you pay 20% or 10% of that, that means you're able to get $10 million worth of work and you spend $1 million. Now, there's a shelf life or there's a expiration date on these projects that you have to actually consider and understand that if you don't spend this money now, it goes away. Most of this funds comes through our MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Genesee Transportation Council. And that is basically the way in which the state funnels federal highway dollars to the municipalities. We've been very fortunate that we've been able to secure a number of grants for reworking our streets. One case example is the Main Street reconstruction project. Another case example is the actual Mount Hope Avenue reconstruction project. But the other part of it is that there's a continuity of service that we provide. Like I talked about earlier, we continue to work during the COVID crisis, keeping things flowing. They see the city working and keeping things going, and we're out there making sure that they see that we're fixing and keeping our infrastructure strong.
Thank you, and a huge credit to Mayor Warren and the administration. Right now, despite big economic downturn coming, we're still because we were planned appropriately, going to have some really exciting, important projects come to fruition this year, including the skate park, the West River Wall. Very, very excited about those things, and kudos. So to some of my questions, this is a recommendation and a question. I'm so impressed with the work that this administration has done related to bicycle infrastructure. I think it's something that, as your team knows, Commissioner Jones, I ask in every month's legislation because I think it's important to highlight. I would love to see a KPI around bike infrastructure. I think that's something that we can and should be able to show to the community. And I give Mayor Warren a lot of credit. We just got done with her her office's budget section. And she talked about how the Office of Data Analytics will be working on some of this stuff as well. I think a KPI to be able to show the community the great work that we're doing on active transportation would be very helpful. I'd also just ask a quick question about that, though, when it comes to complete streets. We've had in the past a couple of projects, one on Parcells and the other one on North Clinton, where outside groups brought in some work in partnership to do some complete streets, bring some bells and whistles and do some traffic calming. And I know that group, I think it's Reconnect Rochester, is interested in doing more. I'm wondering if DES has reached out and started to work with them at all on some more of those projects.
We're Council Committee Chair Gruber. We're always willing to work with everyone, and they have a direct line to Eric Frisch and Darren Ramsey from our team, and also they need to work within the confines of our requirements also. So sometimes we have things that they want to do that don't meet basically the things that we have to do within the right of way. So we try to work with them and make them understand these are certain things that we can do and there's certain things that we can't do.
Gotcha. And I just think that the more we can get outside investment into some of this work, the better. So I'd love to work with you and those groups to figure out and plan for what they're planning on bringing in terms of some complete streets work. It leads me to my next question, which is actually, it's probably for the operations section in relation to sidewalk, some of the sidewalk plowing that we do. You and I have spoken about this before, Commissioner. I'd like to just say it for the record. One of the things I think we need to look and do things a little bit differently now than we have in the past. Again, kudos to Mayor Warren and her team for so much around Rock the Riverway. But I use Rock the Riverway as a great example. We are spending tons and tons of money revitalizing the river, and yet during the winter, when it snows, the river trail is oftentimes unutilized or unusable by people. And I'm wondering, as we start to do things like trying to connect trails and create more opportunities for walking and biking, what is the plan for being able to do some more sidewalk and trail maintenance? Not everywhere, because we can't be everywhere at once, but specifically in areas where we are building the infrastructure.
That's a great question, and it's going to take some a lot of thought and more resources to do that. And we've talked about that. We've looked at it, And some people say, yes, we should have a bare pavement for the actual trails. And some people say, no, leave the snow there so it doesn't become a sheet of ice. So if we go there, we salt it, and then we clean it off, and then you get a thaw, it freezes over, it becomes more slippery than it would be if it was a snow-packed area. So there may be opportunities we'll look at. So.
Okay. And so my last question, and then I'll be quiet, Chair Evans. Well, actually, two questions. One can be in writing, though. I see that the community gardens coordinator has moved to, or liaison has moved to an on-call position. Just like to know how that's going to work. If you could answer that in writing, and just, I think she did some wonderful work in the last year. So appreciate that. My last question, though, is in relation to having a new county administration. I would imagine that one of the few places where there's some real opportunities for intermunicipal agreements and significant dollar savings would be in parks. And I'm wondering if there has been any traction on that and what we can expect to really see. Maybe that's where we can find some dollars to save to put into some more street sidewalk clearing, Commissioner. What do you think?
Well, we've had Pat Meredith, who's their director of parks. I've known Pat since he was the Commissioner of Public Works at the town of Veronicoit when he worked for New York State DOT. We've had these discussions. We're having meetings scheduled to get started in March, but something happened along the way, and COVID comes up. But I have a good relationship with Pat. I have his cell phone number. He has my cell phone number, and that was one of the things that we talked about, is having an opportunity to discuss ways to collaborate and activate more of these spaces within the city boundaries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just for two questions regarding obviously the facilities that we are involved with, Mr. Brown and Mr. Minter. Obviously, I know you guys probably have been sweating bullets with this COVID situation. Can you touch on what your outlooks are for the rest of this year and then early next year as it relates to the facilities and how you're weathering what's happening here and how it relates to budget? Jim, if you want to start.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So obviously, the public assembly facilities have been hit extremely hard because of the pandemic. And certainly after the March 8th announcement, we immediately lost almost 50 events for our last half of the year here. We're on the same fiscal year as the city, obviously, June 30th. And we went from roughly 75, 80 events down to 4. And those 4 were ones that obviously had occurred prior to the announcement. So as we look through the short term of the summer, which is typically a slower time for us anyways, obviously we have reduced business there. And then our forecast into the fall, at this point, we're going to kind of be hopeful that we can regain some of the business. Not all of it is canceled. In fact, we've seen some encouraging signs of postponements and movement into 2021. And we see that as kind of being the norm at this point. I do have a few convention groups that are still holding on for the possibilities of having their events this fall. But to be quite honest with you, to be optimistic of a 20 to 30% business model for the fall would probably be a good sign at this point. Again, there's just so many variables in terms of what we're going to see in terms of guidelines. In the meantime, we prepare protocols and scenarios around those guidelines, talking with partners in my industry. But certainly the quicker we can get back to business, the sooner we can get some of our folks back. We've been put in a very difficult situation, like many of us, of having to furlough or lay off a great deal of our staff. And when you think about the working folks, the dedicated people that work here at the center day in and day out, many of you have been here on a regular basis to the building. Good, hardworking people through no fault of their own have been displaced. That certainly weighs very heavy on us. But in the short term, we're preparing and looking forward to the opportunity to get back to business. And to do that, we're spending a great deal of time with planning and putting, again, protocols and best practices in place as we know them today.
Thank you. And Mr. Minter over at the arena.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. And I just apologize on the front end. The camera on my laptop is not cooperating, so you won't get to see my face this morning, unfortunately. But yeah, similar to what Mr. Brown said, and not to echo it too much, but obviously we were put in a very difficult situation as well. When COVID decided to really drum up, the rest of our hockey season and ultimately our lacrosse season at the arena were canceled. Originally postponed and then eventually canceled. And then a number of events that we had coming up for April and May were postponed. So obviously you can imagine the financial impact it would have on us. And similar to what Jim said, we've had to make some tough choices along the way to keep our business sustainable and look towards the future. But, I would say a couple of things. And as he mentioned too, we're looking at every precaution we can for the future. And a security and a health standpoint for the arena. Obviously, with thousands and thousands of people coming to our facility every year, it can be a high traffic point for spread of bacteria, germs, viruses, obviously. And so we're analyzing entry points, exit points, protocols we may need, from staggered entry times to going completely digital with ticket entry and everything you can imagine there to limit interaction in high traffic points. The other thing I would say too, similar to what Jim said, is, we're seeing a lot more of our events and working with promoters on more of postponements. Some things that were scheduled for the spring that will get postponed to the fall or the winter or early 2021. And it's been a little bit more encouraging than you would think. Some folks are starting to look towards the future for when we can host events again. We have, obviously, with the two sports teams that we own at the building, that's a little bit of a different predicament, because if you look at the American Hockey League with the Amerks, obviously it's not just what's going on in New York State and Rochester that may determine play there. It may be, we have 31 teams in the league that vary from different countries and, states in America and different climates and areas. So some people's restrictions may be larger or smaller than others, depending on percentage of capacity allowed or other protocols you have to have in place. So it's an ongoing, really, process with both the American Hockey League and the National Lacrosse League to find out when we can resume. We're hopeful it would be this fall or in October, but due to the NHL season being most likely delayed, that may happen with the Amerks as well. It's still yet to know. So a lot of the decisions we'll be able to make will be kind of dependent on what happens with the sports teams and the leagues that we work with. And then obviously working through the health and safety of what's being allowed from New York State and paying attention to what our governor is saying, and certain regulations that are going to be put on restrictions for capacity and things like that will kind of dictate the direction that we go. But we're going to obviously put health and safety first for the future, and making sure we're prepared is priority number one. And that's kind of where we are. But thanks again for having me this morning, and just appreciate all the efforts, especially over the weekend with what occurred, and the help with our lot there outside the building and everything else. So appreciate that.
No, thank you. Thank you for being on. And Councilmember Pio, you haven't had the opportunity to speak yet. So Councilmember Pio, and then I'll circle back to Councilmember Lupien.
Thank you very much. I'll make this quick here. I see we have a lot of money going towards the cemeteries, but we don't have a city-owned cemetery, correct?
That's, no, we own two city cemeteries, the Riverside Cemetery and the Mount Hope Cemetery. They're owned by the city of Rochester.
Okay, so we do get revenue from those?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. And the hotel tax, what % of that do we actually receive for the city?
I'm going to ask Mr. Wagner to answer that.
I'll have to get back to you on the exact percentage. It's been more or less fixed over time. In the most recent county budget that went into effect, they bumped up the distribution by $80,000. But our overall percentage has dwindled over time. It's not a fixed percentage. It's actually a fixed amount. But I can get you what the estimated percentage was based on their last year receipts.
I'd appreciate that. Yeah, with the new county administration, maybe we can talk to them about increasing our percentage there. The next thing
that's also another revenue stream, though, that's at risk, right? So we talk with them about guidance around, how they'll distribute that and what decisions they'll make. And at this point, that's still kind of unknown.
Right, and we're going to have an influx of plastic face masks now. Do we have any ideas for what we can implement in order to deal with that for recycling purposes?
The actual face mask would be considered like biohazard because of, we don't know what would happen with that. They have to be disposed of. What we have done and through the mayor's giveaway with the clergy on Friday, we gave permanent masks that I think will be a great opportunity for people to reuse. All they do, they use it, and then they can take it and then wash it and they can reuse it again. I would like to see us moving in that way. When you do recycling, it's reduce, reuse, recycle. And I think the reuse is the part of it that we should be looking at. So that's the opportunity that we have there.
Okay, and the last part is LED lights. It looks like we're going more towards that. The RPD has been asking for those at the beach. Do we have any anticipation for replacing the beach lights with LEDs in the near future to help with taking care of the motorcycle issues and the speeders?
Well, LEDs at the beach, our parking lot that we are responsible for, we have LED lights there in our parking lot. The other parking lot that we do not have responsibility over is a county parking lot, and that's something that I would talk to Pat Meredith about and see if there's a plan for that. I mean, it makes sense from a energy reduction standpoint to introduce LED any chance you get, but it's going to be up to the Monroe County Parks Department to make that decision and how to do that. From us, it's simple. It's a simple business case. It reduces energy and it saves us from a basically labor standpoint. It makes sense for us.
Thank you. And just really quickly about the city internet, citywide internet, $100 million is insane because I pay $50 a month for internet, high-speed internet. So that would take care of 2 million households. If we just paid their internet bill directly, $100 million, that seems way too high. So maybe we could look at just paying, a certain percentage of people's bills or something. I don't know, something to help out with folks who just have no internet access and cannot pay for it. So just my input.
So as the $100 million price, it was what it cost to build municipal broadband in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So that was what the cost for their infrastructure, including the maintenance and the ongoing maintenance of that. I'm not sure what the cost would be here in the city of Rochester, but they were able to get a grant from the Coca-Cola Foundation to actually build that infrastructure for their city. One of the things that we are looking at, as I said, is not necessarily building municipal broadband because a significant number of our population already have access to internet services, is to really look at how do we fill in those gaps. And we were talking to some providers on how do we fill in those gaps of people that don't have access and what that may look like. So it's not off the table. It's just the type of municipal broadband that other cities have implemented. That would probably not be economically feasible for us to do because we don't have a foundation like Coca-Cola or the Casey Jones Foundation or some of those other foundations that in those other cities have access to.
Thank you very much for that. And Commissioner Jones, I'll send you something I found where they are using plastic to make roads. Maybe that can help us. I don't know.
Okay. I'm always interested in new ideas. It's always interesting.
Then we can recycle the road, maybe. I don't know. Councilmember Lupien.
Hello again.
Councilmember Lupien.
Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay. So in terms of consultants that are used on some of the projects, what are the means of oversight and performance management? And are there clawback agreements if they don't meet the metrics that they said they would?
That's one part of our ongoing process where we sit down, we actually review their RFP when they come in, when they make a submission. If they're not chosen, we review what they submitted. We do an assessment on their performance, and we let them know where they're at in regards to improvement. And we're always looking at improving our process and using, basic metrics to determine have they met the expectations of the organization. So that's something that's ongoing.
Okay, is there like a I don't know, some kind of formal policy that you can share or something like that?
We don't have a formal policy, but that's something that we will look at.
Okay. My next question is about my favorite gravel lot in Rochester. I see that we're not planning on developing the lot at parcel 5 for another year or so, year or two. And just wondering, is there the potential to put grass down while we're waiting and allow the community to use it? And also just a little ask for the benches, they're currently facing out. Could we turn them around to face in?
Yes, we have a plan for summer usage that we're actually working on now. That was done at the request of the mayor, and we want to do some unique things at that parcel. Are you referring to parcel 5?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I want to make sure. Yes. So and yeah, I think we could swing the benches in. That should not be a problem.
Okay. Are you able to say if the plan includes grass?
No,
No,
the plan does not necessarily include grass at this point in time. There is a parking garage underneath parcel 5. And so you gotta maintain and have a way for drainage from water. So grass would need soil and other things. So the commissioner and his team is looking at a way to make it more user-friendly, but also maintain the parking garage underneath the structure. The planning department is also looking at engaging one of the companies to do some community engagement so that we can look at making it, of course, a site that is usable for concerts and other things, and design that. And we're in the process of working with planning to do that. Fortunately, with the COVID situation happening, we were not able to get that going as soon as possible, but over in the next budget year, the plan is to actually design, to engage with the community, design the project, and hopefully in the 21-22 budget year, be able to fund the development of a concert site as well as a green space that would allow people to continue to utilize it. But right now, it's not, we're not putting grass there.
Okay. So just to dig a little deeper, is it that the grass can never be there because of drainage, or just that it's a little bit too much of a technical project to work on, knowing that we don't know what the end game is?
It's a little, well, right now is that, you don't want to make an investment like grass and infrastructure when the goal is to turn it and to engage with the community and turn it into a different site. That's not an investment that you really want to make, because it would be hard to transition it to something different. So we're looking at ways to make it more user-friendly, but not with grass.
Okay. And I know that Commissioner Jones, you and Councilmember Gruber have been talking about the potential to open up streets to pedestrians as a response to COVID-19. And I'm just wondering if you had any updates there to share with us.
I believe the mayor's office and the mayor will be making announcements on that in the very near future.
Yes, we've been working, I have an internal team working on a plan for that. And we will be making an announcement about that as soon as that plan is done. Councilmember Patterson is on the committee and has been working alongside our team in developing the plan.
Thank you. And my final question is just as it's a broad question that, maybe needed to be provided in writing, but where are we in terms of meeting our climate action plan goals? And anything you can share about implementation?
Well, we set a goal with the Department of Energy back in 2010, in which we were going to reduce the city's overall footprint by 20% by the year 2020. And I believe there's going to be an announcement coming out, if it has not yet, that we not only met that goal, but we surpassed it. And then I'm going to let Ian tell you a little bit more about where we're at with the goals. But that's one thing I just want to just share with you, because that's something that Ian and I worked on, my goodness, 10 years ago to make that happen. And the reality is that we've surpassed that goal. Ann, you want to follow up?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Councilmember Lupien. As the Commissioner mentioned, he's talking about the Department of Energy's Better Buildings Challenge goal, and that was for our municipal facilities energy use intensity. So there'll be an announcement soon regarding us actually exceeding the goal that we made, the target reduction goal. Additionally, we have greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals in both our municipal climate action plan as well as our community-wide climate action plan. So we will be in the process of evaluating where we're at with the target reduction. So our goals are 20% greenhouse gas emission reduction by the year 2020. So as we're in the year 2020 now, once this year is over, we're going to be measuring where we're at for both of those climate action plans. And we're hoping that we've met our targets or at least close to them. As far as implementation of the climate action plans, we're certainly working hard towards both of those climate action plan implementation actions. For example, for the municipal facilities, we've been switching over to alternative fuel vehicles, implementing energy efficiency measures such as LED lighting. For the community climate action plan, we're working on, as mentioned earlier, the composting feasibility study. We're working on the Sustainable Homes Rochester outreach program, education and outreach to encourage people to switch over to clean heating and cooling technology. And we're also working with some local organizations on a Go All Electric campaign to educate people about the benefits of using electricity rather than natural gas, which will reduce greenhouse gas emissions further within the city of Rochester. And of course, community choice aggregation will also help reduce our climate footprint significantly.
That's really great to hear. Yeah, so great. I can't believe it's been 10 years. And now that we're in 2020, do we have, a stretch goal?
So we do. So for the community-wide climate action plan, it was 20% by 2020 and 40% reduction by 2030. And then we're also aligned with the state greenhouse gas emission reduction goal, which is 80% reduction by 2050.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. President Scott, and then Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you. We're kind of skipping around, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, because of the time, I said yeah, the entire section. Yeah.
All right. 7-34 on mowing services are reduced to reflect the actual need and due to budget constraints. And then above, it has seasonal laborers are added to conduct litter cleanup and so forth. Help me understand. There's a couple of things. One is with the mowing, are these the high density areas, or where's this?
The mowing occurs in our city-owned vacant lots. The mowing occurs at on certain city parks that we have, but mainly in the city-owned vacant lots that we are responsible for mowing and cutting.
Okay, and what's the schedule for that? What's the indicator? It's like when the grass is so many inches, or what is it?
We have a cycle, or we go through. It takes X amount of time to go through one cutting cycle. And then once we complete that cycle, we'll go around it once more. And the grass grows at different rates depending on the actual amount of rain that comes down. So we have budgeted, I think for this year is 10 cycles. And regardless of how much you budget, if you rain a lot and you get a lot of sunshine, that grass is going to grow at a very advanced rate. We feel that a 10 cycle program will meet the needs of keeping the grass at a very measurable level.
Is that cycle more or less than it's been?
That cycle, it's the same cycle. It's the same cycle, but we're reducing the actual number of cycles that we're going to be using.
So we won't be mowing as often. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And is that a reflection of budget reductions or what?
That was a reflection of the budget reduction that the budget office asked us to come up with after we initially submitted our first budget. I had to come up with more reductions after the actual first submission that I made.
So it's not 10 cycles.
No, it is.
If it had been 10 cycles before, then it.
No, it is 10 cycles.
What was it before?
We had 14 cycles before.
That's the question. Okay. So that's significant. That's very significant and extremely so, because one of the things I was going to mention is one of the issues that I get blasted with is people who get tickets for high grass and weeds for homeowners. Said, look at this. This is a vacant lot. It's a city-owned lot. Look at this high grass, and you're going to give me a ticket for my house? So, how do we alleviate that?
Some of those lots are not city-owned lots that people say are city-owned lots.
But the ones that came to me, they were, and because they made it a point of finding out so that they could hit me with it.
Right. So, we feel that the 10-week cycle is something that we'll look at and what we can make adjustments to. But we've been out there. We're in our third cycle right now. We've started cutting, and we're in our third cycle. So.
But you don't foresee an issue with cutting four cuttings out of the cycle? I mean, I understand you may, but you had to do what you had to do.
I had to make adjustments to
we'll monitor it. This is what they believe that they can do. If we find out that this isn't that we're seeing a lot of high grass and weeds and a lot of problems, then we will make adjustments and definitely do that. At this point in time, when it gets hotter outside in July, in August, those times, grass doesn't grow at the higher, as fast as it does in the spring. And so we do see that when spring hits and, the rain and other things, that we do have higher grass and weeds in the lots and in our parks and other things. And I have the same concerns as you do. Just please let us know, and we'll make sure that we send a team over to cut the grass. And this is something that we're going to monitor very closely. A number of years ago, we added more cycles. That was the additional money that we had added because of what we saw. And then, we are now reducing it back. But this is something that we're going to monitor, given the budget constraints. As the commissioner said, there was a need to sort of cut back. And this is one of the places that we ended up cutting back, and we'll monitor it going forward.
So that's actually one of the concerns I had with our new KPIs. Now, I understand that a lot of things that we don't see anymore as a KPI doesn't mean they're not being measured. It's just it's not being included in the budget as KPI. But that's the type of thing that would have been, so that we would get a better idea of what service level reductions are impacted, particularly this year with the big cut that we've had across the board. It's harder to quickly see what the service level reductions are. And then we sort of get hit later by residents who are complaining about things that we weren't quite aware were going to happen. And I know that this one is a particular one that people are sticklers about. So I do appreciate that you say that you're going to monitor it. And I hope that the response that's given at 311 is open and accepting and giving people the right kind of response when they call it. We can't overpromise, but we also have to make sure that the information that people are given sort of acknowledges the extent of their concern in that regard. On another item with the cemeteries, we moved 750,000 or something like that out of perpetual care into a capital project. What's that about?
Chris, if you wanna.
Sure, and just, can you refer to the page you're looking at, just so I can see what you're looking at?
Well, actually, it was up in the area with the summary. Where is it at?
On the revenue side, yeah. So I know in the capital program, we removed a lot of cash capital in the current year. Again, as part of the overall strategy of reducing cash capital. Part of that is because there's a lot of cash capital, a lot of available cash capital in the cemeteries, to be used. So there's a lot unspent. And so I think it was in the current year budget, and I'm just trying to flip to the page, where we were using the perpetual care fund to help support the capital program, and we got away from that in the current year. So I think that's the change that you're looking at year to year.
So what are we able to use perpetual care funds for?
For maintenance of the cemeteries.
But I mean, when you say maintenance, what do you mean? Do you mean building? Do you mean capital projects, or do you mean maintenance?
I believe it's both, but I'm going to ask Suzanne Warren to weigh in on this, because I know she's been involved in this as well.
Yes, it's both. So in the current fiscal year, 2020, we budgeted cash capital. And in order to fund that, we appropriated a transfer from the perpetual care fund. Now that there's no cash capital in the 2021 budget, we eliminated any transfer from perpetual care. We haven't made a transfer from that fund in many years.
Right. So here's the thing. I understood that the perpetual care fund, that the people who are interred there was an expense that was charged to them for perpetual care to ensure that the cemetery was cared for in perpetuity, right? So that means that we're going to take care of it. I didn't understand that it was so that we could build stuff. So am I wrong in that, or what?
I believe, and I'll have to find the legislation, we changed that maybe about 10 years ago. I can get that legislation to you, and we can send that to you separately.
Okay, all right. Because I didn't think that we had the authority to do that. I thought that it was a state law that determined how that could be used. So you can follow up and let me know if you would, please.
I believe it's either in the charter or the code that deals with it.
I'm sorry, say again?
It's either in the charter or the code that talks to what we can use it for. And we did change probably about 10 years ago, so I'll get that for you.
Okay, thank you. And what are the plans? I think I saw that we're going to put in additional scattering gardens.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
And where will that be, Commissioner?
That's going to be, I can give you the exact location. I don't want to give you the wrong location, but that's going to be at the Mount Hope Cemetery. That's per the Martha Lyons report that we had commissioned, and she's actually working on the actual documents, the contract documents, to actually move that forward. So I'll get you the exact location at the cemetery where that will be.
Thank you. And what are we doing with the chapel?
The chapel is, right now, the chapel is being reinforced. We have an actual grant application in with ESD to actually redo the chapel and bring it back to a useful life and being able to utilize it once again for its purposes. So, but right now we're shoring it up so it doesn't, fall in disrepair.
And last question, are we still actively engaged with the Friends?
Yes, we are. Very much
Excellent.
so. Very much
Excellent.
so.
Thank you.
A better relationship with the Friends.
Good.
Good.
I'm thinking of an old Houdini song. The mayor might know that song. Friends, how many of us have? That's Houdini. How many of us have them? The ones you can depend on. Let's all be friends. All right. Councilmember Ortiz, you want to have the last words before lunch? Councilmember Ortiz is standing between you all and lunch. So Councilmember Ortiz, go ahead.
All right, quick, fine. I just wanted to follow up really quick, piggyback on President Scott's questions regarding some of the outdoor work there. And I'm curious in terms of one clarification, the areas that I always see that are in most desperate need of cleanup are the ones along the highways. Is that us or is that county? Like when we're driving along in, the area like on 104 or the inner loop, or is that us or someone else?
That's the New York State Department of New York State.
It's actually state DOT that is supposed to maintain and clean those. And we have been arguing with them for years to do that. We do have teams that we try to send out to clean them when they get really bad, but it is the state DOT's job to actually clean those off ramps. And they have not done so until we put a lot of pressure on them to do so. It's also the inner loop as well.
Yeah, we definitely need to put some pressure. It looks really bad right now in some of these areas. And is there any opportunity for us to do the work and build them back?
No, we cannot build them back. I will turn it over to the commissioner to talk about what him and his team has done. But we, of course, have a number of other areas that our workforce focuses on. And sometimes we have to get approval to divert traffic. And it's definitely a process to actually close down the inner loop or some of these places where we need to do work. And we want to make sure that our folks are safe when working. And it's something that also we've worked with the Sheriff's Department in the past to have some of their work crews go out and clean up. But it is something that we've been working on for years and will continue to work on. Commissioner?
Some of the areas were so in such bad shape that we would go out there and clean it ourselves and not expect to be reimbursed. There's things in which we've shut down the inner loop ourselves and just cleaned it up. 104 corridor, we've done work there. We bought an attenuator. That's a safety device that you put on the back of a 10-wheeler to stop traffic or to make sure that our crews are safe. And we clean it because it's a reflection on us. People don't see it as New York State. They don't see it as Monroe County. All they see is the city of Rochester looking bad and not being cut or not being cleaned up for trash. So I'll get a phone call from someone and I have to make sure that it's taken care of, and we take care of it in a very quick fashion, led by the 40-year employee, Karen St. Albans.
Great. Okay, one last little piece is the seasonal labors piece. It says we're changing it to in-house. What is the source of the new team members on this? Are they part of the re-job, or what's the source where we're getting these individuals to work this program?
Well, some would come from re-job. Some are re-job folks. Others would come from the actual initiative we had earlier on with some of the different neighborhood groups that we're going to do that in-house. Some of those things that we've done with the neighborhood groups and re-job have been something that have been game changers for individuals. I've got a note from an individual that sent it to us just recently, and I'll share the note with you guys later on. But basically, it said through Rejob, I got my first check. This was on last Monday. I got my first check. It just changed my life. My family is financially secured now. I'm working on a project in Plattsburgh. I just want to say thank you to you and to Rejob for what you're doing. So these are opportunities that we're doing with this type of program, working with some of the community groups in the past, but now we'll do it in-house, where we're going to be able to take individuals who haven't had opportunities in the past, that will have opportunities and will work with us. So the only thing we're working on a structure to get them out there in the midst of this COVID situation. So we're putting together a process for that, but we need to have them out there taking care of the corridors that the neighborhood groups were once taking care of for us, now that we're going to be doing in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, DES, Commissioner Jones and your team, and all that you do and all you've been doing through the situation. I was hoping we would be in person for budget hearings because I got a gift for Commissioner Jones. If you guys remember during the CIP hearings, he didn't know what battleship was. So I have a battleship game for Commissioner Jones, and I can't wait till we're back in council chamber so I can present that to him.
Wow.
Wonderful.
So
I feel bad that we're not in person, because usually after the hearings, we present you with dessert or something.
That's right. Where's our treats?
Yeah, so
yeah.
I kind of feel this is not right, because I really relish the opportunity to talk about what we're doing, where we're going, and even the tough questions that I get from my dear friend, the Council President, Loretta Scott. So I just think this is a great process, and we appreciate the fact that we're here to serve, even during these trying times. And thank you. And we're here for everybody.
No, thank you. Greatly appreciate it. And folks, we'll reconvene at 1:45, and then we'll hear from RFD, DRIVES, and Emergency Communications. And I thank everyone for their patience. And there will be a different Zoom link than the one that we're on now. So we'll convene after lunch. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.